Order. We have a quorum. Could we have the roll call, please, Weston?
Yes, Mayor. Mayor Sticks.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Francina.
Here.
Councilmember Rule.
Here.
Councilmember Lang.
Here.
Councilmember Whitman.
Here.
Thank you, Weston, and welcome everyone to the August 22nd, 2023 meeting of the Ojai City Council. Weston, would you please say the pledge
Yes,
for
ma'am.
us?
Would everyone please stand? Place your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Weston. And before we approve the agenda, I just wanted to say a big thank you to our emergency management system. It worked really effectively, and of course, we're all digesting the Ojai 2023 hurricane, which was a surprise to everybody, I would say. And so let's all just take a deep breath and relax our nervous systems. Whew. And especially, I'd like to thank James Vega, if you're listening, James, because James worked so hard to bring all the entities together, all of the emergency management system to coordinate and collaborate. And James, thank you so much, because it really worked well. And a big shout out to Barry Parker. Thank you so much, Barry. Barry called me immediately with a report of what was happening and photographs, and I'm so grateful for the participation. Mark Scott, thank you for coordinating from Fresno, which was unbelievable effort. Our city staff, thank you, Trina. I know you were out and about and working really hard, so thank you to the police department. And also our incredible city staff. Lindy, I know you were out and about. Our public works was super busy, and it was really a great example of collaboration and community and all of us caring for each other. Also, a big thank you to Peggy Lacera for coordinating and instigating getting Kent Hall open for our unhoused population. Thank you, Souza, for working on that. Thanks, Mark, for your encouragement. Thank you, James Hahn, for it's all about opening the door, bringing the key. And also, I just wanted to say that our heart goes out to a lot of the store owners who have lost a lot of merchandise. I made the rounds yesterday. I went to Mini Westridge and OBC, Pat's Liquor. I went to Point de Chien today. And a lot of merchandise was lost. Huge cleanups. It's incredible because you go into those places, you can't even tell that anything happened. So it's been a great example of community coming together regardless of what happens to work for the common good. So thank you very much. So let's just everybody hand. So far, so good. Okay, and at this point, Mr. City Attorney, do you have anything to report out from our closed session?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. The council met in closed session and considered one item, public employee appointment and public employment under Government Code Section 54957 regarding city manager. They considered options for the recruiter and will be making that decision, having interviewed the recruiters, as tonight's agenda on item number 5. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
A second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, wonderful. All right, we will move on to our presentation this evening. It's a presentation of a proclamation honoring the life and service of Terrence Gordon Hill. So Brian Akins, who's the chair of our HPC, will be making a presentation, right? Yes. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. I have my capable assistant here. I'd like to introduce, since we're going to be talking about someone very special to them, Claire Hill, who's here waving her hand at you. Her daughter, Kathy Schaefer, one of the 2 daughters she has, and grandson Jack, who when Terry received this award, I reminded him of this. When Terry received this award, Jack was in his full scout regalia. He is a Eagle Scout, and he was the one that snuck up and handed Terry his notes.
That's so nice.
I solicit his help so he can hold up the annual award that Terry received. So, thank you, Jack. My name is Brian Akins. I'm the current chair of the City of Ojai Historic Preservation Commission. I first met Terry when our good friend David Mason I knew from serving together on the Ojai Valley Museum Board of Trustees together with Claire Hill, said, if you want to learn Ojai history, attend our Historic Preservation Commission meetings. And so I did, being enthralled by stories being shared by Ojai's longtime luminaries. Wonderful, dedicated folks like David Mason, who was the 2010 HPC Lifetime Achievement Award, Terry Hill and Craig Walker, who were the 2018 Lifetime Achievement Award winners. I'm naming these individuals because they were on the HPC also. Rose Boggs and Patricia Clark Donner, who were the 2019 Lifetime Achievement Award winners. These are the luminaries that work so very hard, most for decades, to protect and promote our lovely and historical city of Ojai. We're so grateful for their efforts. Hearing these names, one can understand why any lover of Ojai history would come to listen to them. Terry was the third to receive this award, after David in 2010 and Julie Tumamite-Stensley in 2015. Looking for something to share specific to Terry, I went back and looked at the write-up I submitted to the HPC in July 2018, which was then forwarded to the council to support the nomination of Commissioner Gina McCatton for Terry to receive this lifetime award. And here's what I submitted. I spoke with Claire Hill, cue Kleenex. She said it had been a hard last 6 months for Terry health-wise. Per Claire, hearing about being nominated to a lifetime recognition will have Terry up and doing cartwheels down the hall. You can picture that, right, Jack? Terry was on the Historic Preservation Commission for 22 to 23 years, at that time actually 23. He originally got on the HPC when Claire's principal at the time, Joe DeVito, said, I know something Terry can do. Get involved with the HPC, or whatever it was called at that time. Terry has always been a history buff. When he taught at Villanova, he taught history, Spanish, and biology. His love for history began with learning about Contra Costa County when he attended St. Mary's. Once they relocated to Ojai, he learned all he could about our own valley. I rewatched the presentation made by Mayor Johnston to Terry the night of November 27th, 2018. I just wanted to relay that Mayor Johnston, this one's for you, Councilman Whitman. I just wanted to relay that Mayor Johnston commented on the many seasons he and Terry co-chaired swim meets over at the Nordhoff High School. I know that that has special significance for Councilman Whitman and also for Kathy Schaefer over there, she said. Additionally, Craig Walker left some words that he'd like me to share for him. He is currently out of state on a family matter where they don't have Wi-Fi. Somewhere on earth they don't have Wi-Fi. If I was in the Tetons, I'd understand. I first met Terry when I joined this is from Craig. I first met Terry when I joined the Historic Preservation Commission in 2012. Terry was already a senior member of the commission and clearly respected by all. Terry welcomed me with a smile and immediately took me under his wing. One of my first committee appointments was serving with Terry on the commission's Heritage Tree Committee. Our job was to compile a list of city's heritage trees. We spent several afternoons driving around Ojai with the preliminary list, getting out of the car and measuring trunks and branches. Sounds like a blast. We quickly became friends. We shared a lot in common because we were both retired teachers and both had a passion for Ojai history. Another HPC project that year, remember 2012, was developing a list of historic structures of merit, which we are now updating for the council. Terry's knowledge of Ojai history and architecture were truly amazing. Also serving on our committee were David Mason and Rose Boggs. As you can imagine, I learned a lot about Ojai and its buildings while working on that project. Terry and Claire Hill often opened, second round of Kleenex. Terry and Claire Hill often opened their home for retreats by our commission and social gatherings for the Ojai Valley Museum. Have you seen his Stein collection? That's all I got to ask you to know if you've ever been there. Whenever I had a question, I knew I could stop by Terry's house for direction or information. Even after Terry retired from the commission, he always made himself available to assist local history projects. He was a valuable resource when Elise DePoit and I revised and updated Patty Fry's Ojai history book. Ojai will miss Terry, both as a local historian and as an amazing human being. He has done so much to preserve Ojai history for future generations and to keep that history alive in our buildings and public spaces. Personally, I'll always consider Terry to be my mentor and friend and a true hands-on local historian. Thank you, City Council, for recognizing and honoring this remarkable man who gave so much to our community. And that is from Craig Walker. Thank you, Jack. Jack can verify the bear steins. Did you check out the wiring job that your grandma did? Oh, good, okay. Thank you.
So,
Is,
Betsy, I was going to say a few words
yeah.
as well.
she's trying to be, so,
Yeah, so
Councilman Whitman, please.
thanks. I'm really honored to be able to say a few words about someone I've known since I was a child. I easily get choked up with these kind of things, so bear with me. So I moved to Ojai when I was 9, and Terry was one of the first adults I met. He was a swim team dad, and I swam with his daughters, Kathy and Jen. He was kind of the ringleader of the swim team parents. Once a year, we held a swim meet at the Nordoff Pool that brought swimmers from all over the county, and Terry did everything he could to pull those swim meets off. He seeded the heats, he typed the heat sheets, he worked the snack bar, he organized the timers, and he timed himself. If there was anything else that needed, Terry was the first one to volunteer. When we traveled to other communities for swim meets, Terry wasn't just there. He was engaged with everybody. He was the first one to run over and look at the sheets when they posted the times. And he always had a great word for a kid who had a good time drop. He was also just as likely to take a shift as a timer or a snack bar at the other swim meet sites. My dad was a history nut like Terry, and they were great friends, and my dad had a job that gave him access to Dodger tickets a few times a year. And my dad made a special point of getting Pittsburgh Pirate tickets so that he could get Terry to go with him. And I never asked Terry back then what his connection was with the Pirates, but I became curious when I read his history recently. And he'd spent his whole life in California, and there was no connection to Pennsylvania or Pittsburgh. So I asked Claire, and Claire told me that growing up in California, there were no Major League Baseball teams when he was a kid. And so he was a Hollywood Stars fan. And the Hollywood Stars were the farm club for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And so when the players would graduate up to the major leagues, Terry would follow them. And looking into that a little further, that arrangement ended in the 50s. And my dad was taking Terry to baseball games in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And it made me think about the fact that, Terry maintained his devotion to the Pirates as a, testament to his loyalty and his commitment to tradition. So 20 years ago, I was serving on planning, and I remember we held a joint session with Historic Preservation. No idea what the reason was for that joint session, but it was really kind of mind-boggling for me to be there, serving on this dais with this person who I had looked up to for so long. And it was also kind of mind-boggling that he was treating me as a peer instead of the little kid that swam with his daughters. And preparing to honor Terry tonight, I was thinking back to when I moved here in 1969. And in addition to Terry, there were a few other adults that made a big impression on me. I'll name a few of them. Larry Hartman, Ed Titus, John Wilson. Along with Terry, these were people who gave tirelessly to Ojai. I definitely know that there were others equally worthy of mention, but as a 9-year-old, that's kind of who I remembered. And I know that there were a lot of men and women making a difference in our community that I'm not mentioning here. My father is even one of those. So it strikes me when I look back at the parents of my contemporaries, growing up in Ojai, that it was just in their DNA that they would give to their community. It wasn't something they wanted recognition for. It was just what they did. Sorry. I think it's good that we pause every once in a while and look back and talk about these people who got our community to where we are. So I'll close with this. I was at a speaking engagement recently, and the speaker was asked what he recommended for members of the community that felt lost about how to contribute to a better future. And his recommendation was that each of us find the thing that we love or are good at and make contributions through whatever that is. If you're good at organizing, then help organize. If you're good at writing, then write. And if you're good at raising money, raise money. But do something you connect with. So Terry loved history, and he gave back to the community through that thing that he loved. So I can't speak enough words to say how grateful I am to people like Terry Hill, who gave more than their fair share to our community. And I extend that gratitude to all our past and current commissioners. And I also suggest to anybody, any members of our community listening, that if you can see yourself serving the community, whether it's on a commission or in a community service organization or any other way, the community needs you, and our future generations need you. Thanks.
Thank you, Andy. That was beautiful. And what an honor it is to be here to celebrate a coach and a teacher. And thank you, Brian, for your kind words. And do you want to come on up, Jack? It's fun up here. You can hold the proclamation with me. It's so beautiful. I never met Terry. It's just so beautiful to learn about Terry's life. And Claire, Kathy, and Jack, thank you so much for being here to help celebrate this day. And I loved, Andy, what you said. It's just in your DNA. So figure out what you love and help out. And what a beautiful model of service and dedication to our community. And 23 years on a commission. That's impressive. Okay, proclamation honoring Terrence Gordon Hill. Whereas the city of Ojai and the broader community lost a valued member and leader on May 20th, 2023, with the death of Terrence Terry Hill. Whereas Terry Hill served for more than 20 years on the Ojai Historic Preservation Commission. Whereas Terry Hill was a tireless and outspoken advocate for the importance of our community's historical heritage. Whereas Terry Hill dedicated his career to the education of our youth. Whereas Terry inspired and informed countless community members concerning the history of Ojai. Whereas Terry served the Ojai Historic Preservation Commission with distinction. Whereas Terry was a tireless supporter of the, oops, I already said that, sorry. Whereas Terry's sense of humor, kindness, and willingness to give his time enriched those fortunate enough to have known and worked with him. Whereas his true legacy lies in his love of knowledge and history, and his example in the giving of himself for a better community. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed, the city of Ojai, on behalf of its residents, recognizes the significant contributions of Terrence Gordon Hill over the course of his distinguished service to the community and mourns his death. Now, therefore, be it further proclaimed that I, Betsy Sticks, Mayor of the City of Ojai, and on behalf of the Ojai City Council, do extend its sincerest condolences to his wife, Claire Hill, and his daughters, Catherine Hill and Jennifer Hill Ottermatt, and his son-in-laws, Luke Schaefer and Kyle Ottermatt, and his 5 grandchildren, Kendall J. Ottermatt, Ian J. Ottermatt, Jack R. Schaefer, Molly C. Schaefer, and Peter G. Schaefer. Thank you very much.
And for those in the audience and watching our live broadcast,
I'm going to just say a quick, very heartfelt thank you. Otherwise, I'll have to pull the Kleenex out of my pocket. But I do want to add something to make you smile. Sunday was our 63rd wedding anniversary, and we had an earthquake. And I called the girls and I said, your dad was afraid that I was going to forget that day, and I'm sure he talked to the good Lord and said, do something to remind her that's a special day. So I know how thrilled he is with this. I'm just praying his sense of humor doesn't carry through to tonight, showing his happiness for this. Thank you so much. We are both Terry and I were from out of town, but we moved here in 1960, and we have been feeling like we were born and raised here. We love Ojai. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
we will take a brief pause for a photo opportunity. Yeah, let's call everyone up, family included. Carl, we'll come here in front of the dais.
We have to do
And
that.
council members, you can just stand behind your seat. Very good. Whoever would like to be in the photo. If you don't, that's okay. If you can't see the camera, I can't see you. Mayor Pro Tem, scoot over so you can see the camera.
The other way, the other way.
You're the left.
Show you.
Got the shot?
Thank you. Thank you again.
That's it.
Thank you for all the work. Thank you so much. That was really nice, really nice. I think Claire taught kindergarten, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't know this one.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to commission reports. No commission reports, I believe. So we will move on to public communication. And just a reminder that these are items not on the agenda, and because they're not on the agenda, we cannot discuss them. We appreciate your viewpoint and participation, and we can agendize them in the future. Public comments are 3 minutes. At the end of the 3 minutes, you'll hear a chime, and please respect each other's time, and in the spirit of equity, stop talking when the chime sounds. No giving away time to a speaker, And if you're in agreement with the previous person, please just say ditto. A couple of suggestions I've received from the community. People have asked if you could say your name. Of course, you don't have to. Say your name and say your address if you would like to.
Or
And-
city residents.
City of residence. And there was also a request, if you could address the council rather than the audience, that would be helpful. Okay, so we will,
Can I make
yeah,
one,
sure.
just in case anybody's here to talk about the item H on the consent calendar, we're gonna end up asking the council to pull that and discuss it, because we've discovered a challenge on the funding end of that we need to have the council learn about. I just thought I would mention that in case somebody was here tonight to
Okay.
discuss that.
Thank you. All right, we have one public comment, Barbie Kafka, who will be using an interpreter.
Hello, my name is Bobby Kafka. You may have not seen me before. Yeah, tell me, because they understand me.
Can you all understand her? Did you bring her
Yes,
your voice?
yes. Okay. I think my first time to experience to speak at the City Hall meeting. And I am rather excited to be doing it because I'm here for a purpose. I just want to encourage the Ojai people to unite so that we can make Ojai a much better city. And you never know if we have the success that can spread through the country because a lot of things are changing, especially for the housing and the home. But I know that we can do it. But it takes a lot of courage, compassion, and love to do it. And just to remove the politics involved. You know, this is what our country is going through right now. So I'm just having a dream that things will happen for Ojai, especially for the community garden. It's a beautiful place, but I think there are things that can be improved to make it much better because it's so nice to work there. I see the beauty of the flowers. The one thing that's been bad over there is the tents. The tents are extremely thin. You know what happens? The shrubs are too small. They go up and they will chew off the tents and make holes. And you know, it's not good to have that because you need to have a good house. This is the problem. This is why I have noticed our climate change is changing. So that's another reason why we have to point out those tents have to be improved. But I don't think so. I think that we need to have better systems, like better houses, small houses that can be put up there. But these homes can be used for other things. So I think this would be a good idea that we can start talking about this because it's so important for our country to be successful and show the world that they can do it too. But this is why I'm here to encourage all of you. If we could put our hands together and work on this. This is my vision. And I think it would be wonderful if this happened. But this is just the beginning tonight. So I wanted to come to meet all of you so that we could talk about it. You may not know, but there's been a lot of things happening. The community garden, they need to be improved. Like the hose that I had to use was cut off. I couldn't use it. So there are a lot of things we need to talk about. Maybe next time we can talk about things. But I want to thank you for allowing me to speak to you tonight. I know I have a hearing loss, but it just makes me special. I can show you that I have a vision for the dreams that come true. And I want to thank you so much for allowing me to speak tonight. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Barbie. Thank you. Thank you.
Do you have any questions or anything?
Well, we're actually not supposed to ask questions at this point. We can agendize things for the future.
Can I ask, who are you? Can you tell me who you are?
I'm the interpreter.
An interpreter.
The interpreter.
You're the interpreter.
ASL interpreter.
Yeah, yeah, but what is your name?
Oh, Rel McDonough.
I can speak to that.
Rel McDonough.
This is an accommodation for an ADA request.
Yes,
Yeah,
okay,
that's a
thank
high-
you, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much
Yeah.
for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, Barbie. Nice to see you. Any public comments on Zoom, Weston?
No raised, yes, we have one raised hand now, and I'll say to our many Zoom attendees tonight, this is the time to raise your hand for general public comment. First, we'll have Larry Steingold. Larry, you have the floor.
Yes, sorry. Because we are talking about affordable housing and the city and roads, I would like you all to propose SB 649 to give Ohioans preference, just like the state has authorized us to. Also, when you are to put in 25-mile-an-hour speed limits, you should also plan ahead for speed bumps, because as the roads get nicer, the speeds are going to get faster. So please try to think ahead of the curve. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
No more raised hands, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Weston. We will move on to the consent calendar, and we are going to pull H.
Yeah.
Yep, okay. All right, let's discuss that at this point. We don't need to discuss it? No.
We do.
Okay.
Do you want to adopt the rest of it, or?
Sure. Is there a motion to approve the rest of it?
I'll make a motion. I'll move to approve the rest of the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, let's look at item number H, which is the consideration of an agreement with Ojai Valley Land Conservancy to reimburse the Conservancy to, go ahead, Mark?
Yeah, and we're really sorry to be pulling this tonight. We thank the Ojai Valley Land Conservancy for working with the city. This relates to the ATP project and the potential for creating a public parking lot and pedestrian bridge that was an accommodation for the fact that parking was being removed. And they were also, the Conservancy was also going to be making changes to 2 hiking trails that are associated with the preserve there. And so it is a good project. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the concept of the project. The problem we've got is that in looking at the funding source, we hadn't realized that the ATP project, which has been listed in previous staff reports as funding, was apparently more of a generic reference to the project funding than the actual grant. And we found today, and this is a last-minute discovery, so I don't foreclose the possibility we're going to find other ways around this, but we found today that the grant application doesn't include this project, and it's far past the date at which we can change the scope of the grant. These grants are pretty much locked in the way they're approved, and we cannot use this funding for that purpose. So we are back to, took a step backwards and said, well, this is $300,000. What else could the city come up with for $300,000 to cover this cost? That's a lot for our budget. and we do not have an answer for the council tonight. My initial thought was you could approve the project agreement with the proviso that we have to find the funding, but the trouble is the grant or the agreement actually calls out the amount. And it's conceivable that the solution to this may require a change in the scope of the project where that number is wrong. So rather than do that, we're suggesting you pull it off tonight and send us back to work with thank yous to the Conservancy for hanging in there with us and seeing if we can't find some other way around being able to deal with this project.
Thank you, Mark. Souza?
So we can expect that this will come back as a future agenda item?
We'll bring it back because we'll need to report to you what has happened. I can't tell you right now where we find $300,000, but we will come back and tell you what options we're able to identify. I mean, we could use Measure C. You could use Measure C money for this. The trouble is there's lots of uses for Measure C money that the city has identified. And right now, from a cash flow basis, that really isn't available to us. Not that we would need it immediately. This is a reimbursement agreement, so we wouldn't need the money immediately. We would need it over time. But we need a little bit of time to work through this and be able to come back and give you the real options.
Can I ask another question? Can we divide, if we need to, can we separate the parking lot from the pedestrian bridge and the two hiking trails? And there's a number of reasons why I asked that, because I was looking again at the, I hope they don't hear me say this, the church parking lot. And of course, the future is shared parking. That is a huge parking lot, and there's at least 20, at least maybe 50 parking spots right at the border of the Meadows Preserve. And, you know, there's some way, there's maybe another way around this that I hope staff could look into.
I think all of those creative approaches require us to take a look at them. I'm a big believer in shared parking.
Yeah.
So we'll take a look at what those other alternatives might be. But we need to take the time to do that right.
Yeah. So do you need anything from us besides pulling it?
I think there may be people here who want to speak to it, and certainly if there's and I'm sorry I don't know people, but I'm new. If there's people from the Conservancy here that I should already know, I apologize, but we want to thank them for what they've done working with us so far, and perhaps they have comments they want to make.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but it's the Land Conservancy. Tom Maloney, would you like to say anything? Thank you for your patience and understanding.
Great.
And thank you to staff for looking into this.
Yeah, I mean, this was a shock. We do have, just to give a fuller picture of the project, it's long been contemplated to make the Meadows 365-day-a-year access. You know, Phil Moncharge is on our board. He's on the school board. There's talk of repurposing Miners Oaks Elementary. That puts further emphasis on this bridge project. Yeah. When Greg came to us about the parking, because I parked along Maricopa Highway for the parade on the 4th of July, and you really feel like you're taking your life in your hands when you get out on you step into the road or the highway. So we really want to do this project, and of course my phone starts ringing. I think at this time of year, you know, Mark, you have more experience than I do. There's often, you know, federal transportation enhancement money kicking around. So I'm in communication with Supervisor Levere's office, and I think perhaps, you know, Steve Bennett or Monique Lamont might come in and be able to help us with some of this if there's some leftover federal money, you know, coming up to September end of federal fiscal year. So we're going to keep beating the bushes. But we've raised about $250,000 for the bridge project and the trail enhancements. The Lions Club is going to do the improvement of the trail from Lomita across to the existing bridge, getting it set. We are already under contract for the bridge project, and we think this parking area makes a lot of sense. So we'll just keep plugging away, and we'll find a way to either maybe there's another ATP kind of grant here that they need to get out the door too, you know, because a lot of times the the state and federal agencies need to spend the money as well. So thanks.
Thank you, Tom.
Yep.
And thanks for your patience.
Sure.
Appreciate it, and all that you do, and stay safe. Parking is important. Any comments online, Wesley?
Yes, we have one raised hand, and for those on Zoom, this is on pulled consent calendar item H, 1H. Larry Steingold, you have the floor.
I thought, a point of order, I thought public speaking was for public speaking, and then there would be another opportunity to speak on a consent item. I was going to speak on the agreement with the county. Is that too late to speak on?
But after we vote on this item.
Mr. Steingold, we can take that comment from the consent calendar. Please proceed.
Oh, okay, thank you. I
Wants to
spent
vote?
40 years in commercial real estate, and it's a lease or a pop-up lease or an agreement. And while the discussion items talk about food and custodial care and what have you, it leaves silent who will pay for the food, who will pay for sanitary services. Okay, it talks about custodial services in the term sheet, but it doesn't talk about sanitation services in the term sheet.
What
talks
item
about-
is this?
G.
Gee,
G? Okay.
I mean, what I'm just saying is the lease needs to be tightened up. It puts a lot of emphasis on us, and we have very little money, very few employees, and on the term sheet, costs associated with custodial services, food service personnel, and supplies. It's silent on new food, sanitary services, which means plumbers, porta potties, and what have you. It also is very silent on police services. If you have 150, 200 people standing at Sarzati and camping out, our one officer who we're paying for is not going to be sufficient to take care of the crowd and the city. And I know we're supposed to coordinate with the county, but it doesn't say who will pay for police services. So I would think that if we could go over that term sheet, which I'm more than happy to help with, it's very important that we tighten it up because the city manager is going to come and go, and this agreement's going to be around a long time. And it's a good thing. We really do need the county to step up because we're a hobby town for a lot of tourists, and we don't have the money to be on the hook for this stuff. So I think we should be more responsible and have them pick up the tab or at least have it in writing for police services, new food, new sanitary services, new custodial, what have you. So please review it more carefully, I would hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
No more raised hands on Zoom, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we will move on to the public, okay. Mr. Miley? This is on H, correct?
Hello, this is about H. If the ATP budget could afford $300K for a parking lot and a bridge, and now it's been pulled back, and if there's any city money in ATP that matches the $300,000, it would seem that we would have $300,000 that we don't spend from our budget because we now have $300,000 back. So maybe that could go. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you, Bill. All right, now we will move on to the public hearing. Item number,
We need to vote on.
oh, okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. City
Direction
Attorney.
of staff.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar with the exception of H.
We approved the consent calendar.
Yeah, that was done, so it would be perhaps a motion to direct staff to negotiate further on the OVLC agreement.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'll make a motion that we direct staff to investigate the different avenues of getting to an agreement with OVLC, Ojai Valley Land Conservancy, over the agreement related to the parking lot and improvements on the Meadows Preserve.
Second?
Can we have a friendly amendment that if all else fails, that there also be a discussion with whoever owns the church parking lot?
We can include that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, wonderful. All right, thank you. Now we will move on to the public hearing. Item number 2, introduction of an ordinance regulating.
Wait, did we approve the consent, the rest of the consent?
We did.
Yes.
Okay.
And Madam Mayor, if staff could add one word. On the question raised by Mr. Steingold, Section 10 of the agreement does provide for reimbursement requests by the city to the county, from the county to reimburse certain costs, including costs associated with custodial services, food service, personnel, and supplies, if those costs would not have been incurred but for this shelter usage of the facility. So the details will be determined in the event of a disaster, but there is some provision for reimbursement requests from the county to the city. And that's on page 1-7. Thank you.
Great. Okay, now we will finally move on to the public hearing. Number 2, introduction of an ordinance regulating cannabis lounges and cannabis dispensaries. Mr. City Attorney, do we have a staff report? I'm sorry, Mr. City Manager.
I will do my best. And Brian Popovich has come up, and he's the real expert on this, so I will punt to him at a certain point. As the city council knows, this item's been before the council and was directed to come back with an ordinance change to address 2 particular issues. One is the opening or the allowance for up to 3 cannabis consumption lounges. There's very specific conditions associated with that if you need to go over those, Brian can do that. And also, there's a slight change to the area of the city that is allowable for use, for these uses to exist. And again, they can be defined specifically if the council needs, by Brian. You have a map for that, Brian?
Yes, it was attachment B.
Oh, there we go. So that shows, well, maybe you can describe the areas of the city that are expanded to allow these uses.
So the consumption lounges would be allowed in the purple one, which is the M1 MPD zone, and then the C1 zone east of Park Road. The green encompasses where the dispensaries would be allowed, which would be the existing M1 MPD zones. Then the C1 general commercial, which does exclude the 1.5 FAR overlay, which is the downtown district. So that would be excluded from dispensaries.
So in general, these are not dramatic changes, but there is change, and it does open the door, so to speak, for cannabis lounges. That's what I can tell you about it off the top, and if you've got questions, we can answer.
Okay, any questions? And just a reminder to council, these are questions, so if you could just keep your questions short and let's do our best not to veer off into discussion, because that comes after the public comment. And if you can remember to bring it through the chair, that'd be great. Mayor Pro Tem Rancina.
So what you just stated, Brian, that's a proposal that hasn't been voted on, correct?
It's what's in front of you.
Yeah, so if we wanted to add, for example, South Fulton, or if someone had wanted to expand into the former Suzanne's building, that's been suggested that if the council considers it and agrees, we can still expand the commercial zone. Is that correct?
Yeah, the council can adjust where cannabis dispensaries and/or lounges would be allowed. That's tonight's item.
Yeah. So that's just,
What is presented to you now is what the council recommended last time. We brought forward in a formal ordinance, but it's still up to the council to adjust if desired.
Okay, thank you. That's what I thought. Just want to make sure. Okay.
Councilmember Lang?
Yes. So I had a question regarding the sale of food, non-cannabis or non-hemp-related food items. So the ordinance doesn't specify, it doesn't prohibit them, but does that preclude a cannabis lounge from being able to sell food items or non-alcoholic beverage items?
As drafted, that is not prohibited, but
Okay.
that could be expressly stated.
Yeah,
The only express prohibition is that customers are not permitted to bring their own cannabis or food or alcohol or tobacco. Lounges must provide free water, and sale of food and food items infused with cannabis is permitted. So the food there is clarified, but you could add food and non-alcoholic beverages.
right, thanks. It's my recollection that when we spoke about this at a previous meeting, that we expressly said that we wanted to include that allowance.
Yeah. So,
Any other questions from council?
oh,
Mayor Pro Tem?
so it's my understanding that we're going to go through the draft ordinance with all our, I have a lot of questions about the actual ordinance, similar to Rachel, but we can do that after the public comment, right?
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right. We will go ahead and open the public hearing. First, we have Bill Miley, then William Wyrick, and then Ted Moore.
Hello, good evening. My name is Bill Miley. I have a credential which most people don't have. As a public health educator manager for the Ventura County Public Health Department, from 1969 through 1975, I helped develop the alcohol and drug program. From 1972 to 1975, I was its director. I fully support C1 zoning for dispensaries and lounges. It's time for the full fairness and equity for medical and recreational cannabis. Some will object for historical reasons, which have been proven not true. Lounge hours should match alcohol on sale hours. Folks need evening time to socialize and relax in a public place, and also to learn more about responsible use. Lounges should be allowed to have full restaurant license, similar to alcohol serving restaurants. The food softens the direct effects. It's like wine with dinner, snacks with beer, food with drinks. I support lounges. I have supported lounges from the very beginning, and I surely support them now. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Next, we have William Wyrick, then Ted Moore, then Michelle Rosenblum.
I really love that hopefully we're poised to take another step on the destigmatization of a somewhat sordid history of cannabis regulation and legal consequences for people who really didn't deserve what was done to them for many decades. And so I really appreciate the step that I think we're about to take here. And I want to make a couple points. My only credential is economics, PhD, and all that, and the reason I bring that up is that I want to add the additional important reason, and that is to allow movement out of this manufacturing plan district into commercial zone, because that opens up economic opportunity. I have people all the time literally asking me, I have a startup business, but where do I locate? Everything's full in the Bryant edition. And we're using valuable startup space for cannabis retailing. We did it for a reason at the time, but I think the time to evolve into the commercial zone, however this council designates appropriately, makes a whole lot of sense for the purpose of encouraging local businesses and local startups in that short supply area, as well as the overall destigmatization effort. A couple other comments. I suggest that you do keep tying the dispensary to the lounge, because morphing to 6 locations might defeat the purpose I just mentioned. I think we might want to try to incentivize moving that retail into a retail area and not tying up those startup semi-industrial locations for entrepreneurial activity for local people that are looking for business locations. I also don't quite understand the 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. time. I mean, 10 to 9, give people coming home from work a little more time. You know, it's not even dark at 7. It's still 11 hours, so I suggest a 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. rather than 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. And if you're talking about a safety plan, understand the purpose of that, but have to be careful to stipulate it in a way that makes sense, that that the operators can handle what that means exactly in terms of handling the customer environment in a way that is reasonable, you know, and not so prone to litigious potential that we end up defeating our purpose here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Next, we have Ted Moore, then Michelle Rosenblum, then Chelsea Satula.
Good evening. I'm Ted Moore. I have a handout. Can I just go ahead and do it myself? Just an aerial photograph of just kind of that area. Okay, let me do that for you. Because I want to refer to it.
Yes, and this material on the dais will be available in the clerk's office tomorrow.
Thank you.
I have a little different perspective that I wanted to give you. My background, first, I've lived here, just to give you briefly, I've lived here for 34 years. I've been developing commercial real estate for 40 some odd years. The only thing I've ever done here in Ojai is the little 8-building office park on Bryant Circle, and which I sold a long time ago. David Burry was the architect many years ago on that project. So I'm really representing kind of riding a couple of horses, if you will, in the situation. I'm working with a group. It's a large funding opportunity to help the American Legion Hall. Okay, and it's a property, and what you see there is an aerial of properties. I just want to reference and give you some input and thoughts on. It includes the American Legion property. It also includes property owned by a guy named Bob Walk, who is a longtime friend of mine. And by putting the boundary line at Park Road, it's kind of similar to what has been set up here just recently, is you're cutting off really any viable sites, in my view, for the lounges. I'm glad to see that I wasn't quite clear on the dispensaries. If you put them, you know, along that section, they still would fit. But the point I'm trying to make is that you cut away viable sites. There aren't many, really. I mean, I know commercial properties really well in this community. And I am working with, let me just go back to the American Legion Hall folks. Let me check my time. I'm helping them figure out a way to, you know, it's part of a much bigger project. It's like 100 of them, the people I'm working with throughout Southern California. They basically just barely break even. So this would be a way for them to, you know, redo their project, and the Walk property would be included. They're interested in developing too. We're just at the very beginning, so there's nothing really set in stone. But the point I'm trying to make is dispensaries and lounges can afford to pay the rent for new construction when you redevelop an area. You know, there are very few tenants that can do it these days, and I'm very intimately know this situation. Okay? Maybe a restaurant, but that's why I would like to see it open for both the lounges as well as the dispensary. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted.
Yep.
Next, we have Michelle Rosenblum, and then Chelsea Satula.
Good evening, everyone. First, I just want to say we made it this far. It's been a long journey. There's some new faces along this journey, and but here we are. And the ordinance put forth is an awesome step in a direction that we've been needing to go in for a long time, not just this city, but the county and the state and the rest of the states. And this plant deserves to be normalized. And Why I'm up here though is as much progress as this ordinance does make, and we may say, you know what, this was already a lot we're giving them, and baby steps and all these things. And these aren't baby steps. I don't want to play them down at all. But when I compare it as a non-alcohol drinker, when I compare this plant to alcohol and what we're proposing here, it still falls short of normalization compared to alcohol, which we just know and has been proven over and over again to be a much worse problem. But we're adults, right? And we're here making adult decisions and trying to do it in a safe manner with regulations amongst our fellow citizens. We're not black market, people are getting away with all kinds of things now, and I'm not trying to bust anybody or anything, but it's like this stuff is all over the place, and here's some good players that are trying to do it the right way and work with you guys. So I have 2 points here that I want to make on the current ordinance, and one is the part on proposing that it's indoor only. Personally, I'd like to see a patio space or some open air space that I personally feel like would be beneficial to have combustion outside. If that's not doable, then at least consider vaping, which is much more feasible and doesn't produce the odors that people complain about. And also, at the very least, like the beverages and the edibles, like why not have a drink outside? Who's getting bothered there? And if I'm coming up visiting Ojai, or I'm a tourist here or whatever, like you can have drinks of alcohol outside all the time. Why not a drink of cannabis? And consider the vaping. The other point that we've already heard is the hours. Why shouldn't it be the same as bars? We're here as adults, and I feel like 7 p.m. that's like curfew for a naughty teenager, and that's not what we're here doing. This is about giving adults respect to make choices that are alternatives to alcohol, to socialize. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Michelle, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Of the lounges that you know of that exist in the world today, do most of them have an outdoor space?
It's very different based on different cities, and so I have seen some smaller cities, mainly in Northern California, where they did have outside seating, and inside they had more wellness activities where they were doing like massage and body work with topicals and things. There's lots of really imaginative ways to do this, but for smoking, it's like no, you don't smoke in here. I don't smoke in my house. I go in the backyard where all my neighbors are in the residential area legally every day. So why can't I go to a safe space and do it? And maybe a location directly next to a residential area is maybe not the best idea or whatever, but we're talking about a very small amount of plant material, compared to like burning logs in a barbecue or a meat smoker or a grill or your fireplace. I mean, these aren't billowing clouds of smoke. That would cost a fortune.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Councilmember Lang.
One other question too. Do you know of if for outdoor spaces, are there smoke remediation or smoke ventilation options that could contain some of the smoke within a space?
I think that's a good question, and I'd want to consult with experts more on this. But what I've kind of seen, other than the ones that are just blatantly outside, is like sort of a mix, like define outside, right? Like if you have a courtyard kind of area, and again, this becomes a real estate problem next, right? But like in theory, if we're just writing ordinance here, again, define outside. Like if you have like a hangar kind of area or like a big like open door or an open wall, and then there's also kind of like ventilations that'll make it so that like the air is always sucking inwards, and so even if there is an open space or an open ceiling, like there is always air like going a particular direction. Or like if even in the regular ones, like even the indoor ones, like when they open up, like the air is always sucking in, right? I'm not an expert on the technology on how big of a space that allows for, but, excuse me, the other consideration is like doing it on a rooftop, for example, has very different airflow than like walls and surroundings. And so if it's up higher, it could go up higher. But yeah, if you're just outside, the smoke is going to go in the air how it goes.
Thank you, Michelle.
Maybe another expert can speak to that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Chelsea Sutula.
Thank you, Council. So good to be here. We're just making great progress. It's great. Got Bill Miley here, MPH in support. I know the Chamber's in support too. I think I'm just really happy to be here. Thank you. Yeah, I do think there are outdoor air control things, and that wouldn't be an issue. There's definitely ways to monitor nuisance, which is anybody complaining, right? If anybody's complaining, then it's a problem and you shut it down. If no one's complaining, nobody notices. I'm the same as Michelle. I blow my smoke out the window. I don't want it in my house. Nobody wants that. Do my neighbors complain? No. They haven't said a thing. I don't know. Anyway, the only three things that I would like to address about this particular ordinance, I think, I could be wrong, I think we decided before with the original ordinance to leave things like the hours of operation out and leave those up to city manager discretion, so it wasn't this big issue every time we wanted to adjust hours. I do think that closing at 7 is not feasible for a lounge. I would love to push the boundary to South Fulton if we're considering a hard boundary. Just that one extra block. I have pictures of what it looks like on one side of the street versus the other side of the street, which is the new real estate, Berkshire Hathaway, whatever, and then Westridge. I would love to be in the old VFW building and support them and make that work. That's set back from the street. It's got amazing parking. That would be a lovely location. I'm open to all ideas. I don't have a concrete thing in mind right now of what I want or plan to do. It's entirely up to what the city is going to allow. I'm not going to invest a bunch of money sitting and waiting and hoping. That's not my MO. It's going to be when the city decides, okay, then that's when we'll start making plans. We've got all kinds of ideas. And I've heard that bingo night for seniors is the most popular thing in Palm Springs. So yes, that is a very popular thing. And you don't have to be senior to love bingo, I'm sorry. The only other thing in the ordinance, the co-location is a little vague to me. I appreciate, I don't personally want to be dissociated physically from a lounge, but I need a lot of space. I have 3,200 square feet where I am now, and I can't fit a lounge in there. So if the option to move to commercial zone is like, well, now you got to have 2 parcels and they're smaller, but they're like a block apart, I'd make that work. Maybe I'd have to run some numbers, and maybe it would work and maybe it wouldn't, but it would be an option. And that's all really the main thing I'm asking for is just some flexibility and options because real estate is so constrained and because our town is so tiny. And right now, if we stay where we are, we're going to be next to residences very soon, right? So it's like, no place is perfect, but we're not going to be a nuisance. And thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Chelsea. Next, we have one more public comment right there. Yep. Jeff Kroll, is that right? Jeff Kroll, thank you.
Sorry, I'm late. Hello, staff and council and everything. Had to get my arm out of the mouth of a dog. Yeah, I had to go to the ER. First off, I want to remind everyone that 70% of the population in Ojai voted for cannabis access. Of course, you granted us cannabis access. We've been in existence 4 to 5 years now. Has there been any problems? No. Have we had to address any problems or modify the ordinance? No. So I think we, collectively, the 3 of us, would at least like to have the option. We know that real estate is short, but I also don't think that the mindset of developing the east end of Ojai is very practical for anybody because there's just not that much in the way of commercial buildings. But there is Vaughan Shopping Center. There are some other areas that we could consider, but the arcade, of course, It's already been implied that it's not a possibility. I want to also remind you that states did not grant permission when they joined the federal union to give away their rights of health and safety. And many, many cities have bit the bullet and gone against federal regulation in order to make their cities and their counties safer. Unfortunately, about 2/3 of the locations in California are still holding out and being in a moratorium phase. So with that said, we really need to think about health and safety when you make this decision. So is it safe now? Is someone going to consume cannabis, if they use cannabis, in a safe environment? Tell me where that is. In a person's home? Of course. In their car? No. Is it safe to have an edible infused type of mantra of a lounge? In my opinion, that is not safe. I do think that smoking or vaporizing is certainly a more controllable, very similar to alcohol, and you know when you can stop and when you can cut out. The edible solution is really, and that may be the way a lounge could be profitable. In the state guidelines, we're not allowed to mix alcohol with cannabis. So alcohol and beer sales is not an option. Many of the landlords that I've spoken with to consider the possibility of a lounge, they said based on what the city ordinance would come and look like. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Any comments online?
Yes, Mayor. We have 5 raised hands so far. First, we'll have Larry Steingold, followed by Jackie Subek, and then Jake Wall. Larry, you have the floor.
Thank you. First, I support the lounges on moving. I also support keeping them all under 3 ownerships and 3 locations, not 6, which could possibly happen. And then they could sell those off, and you could be dealing with 6 owners and doing this again in the future for more locations. And it's quite really interesting that first it started out illegal. Now it's let's move to Vons, which is what we talked about 2 years ago and 4 years ago when they were here before. So why don't we just all go and get it done? But the big issue is going to be parking. They're going to move to Ojai Avenue, what have you, and we don't have a valet parking plan. They want to have a restaurant with food. They want entertainment. They want bars, whatever. They call it whatever you want, but they're going to have a lot of people. They're not going to have all the parking that's required per code. So they're going to need valet parking. We need a valet parking. No valet parking on Ojai Avenue. You can't pull in and pull out, whatever. Figure that out, but we got to get that done. And maybe if they want something from the city and they want from the residents, maybe they would be willing to pay a higher tax rate. Just a question. Because we're giving, they're getting, and this is obviously financial. So maybe the city should partake in some of their increased earnings, per se, because we may need more police support. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Next, we have Jackie Subek, followed by Jake Wall, and then Becky. Jackie Subek, you have the floor.
Hi, good evening. Am I being heard? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jackie Subek. Some of you you've heard from me before, others have not. I'm a longtime cannabis advocate in the state, particularly in West Hollywood, where I actually helped create the Cannabis Consumption Lounge program and helped write the ordinance for that. So a lot has changed since the last time that I talked to you. And one of the things that's changed is we have open lounges now. And so
I'm sorry, Jack, can I ask the audience to be quiet? It's hard to hear up here with the ambient noise. So if you could stop any conversation, that would be great. Thank you.
I can try to talk a little louder as well.
Go ahead, Jackie.
Okay, great. So I want to just address a few of the questions that came up tonight here. And one of them is about the indoor-outdoor. So we have a lounge now in West Hollywood called The Woods. It's actually owned by Woody Harrelson. And their floor plan, they got 6,000 square feet. And when you go in from in the front door, there's a store. They have their dispensary. There's also a side entrance. And behind the dispensary is a giant courtyard that's very beautiful, like an oasis. They have open smoking inside of that courtyard. They also have cabanas that they built that you could also, rent. And both of those places, the cabanas and the exterior locations, have air scrubbers and certain air filtration and odor control mitigative equipment in there. It's required by the city. So that is very doable. I go there frequently, and it is, you're not coughing, there's not wafts of smoke everywhere that just hang out. They quickly get scrubbed away. The second thing I want to talk about is the beverages. I don't even know if everybody knows, but cannabis beverages have become a really, really big item, because especially at the lounges where you don't have alcohol, now you can have these cannabis beverages. They're very low milligrams, most of them. They'll give you a glass of ice. You can pour it over a glass of ice. It's like a cocktail, only it's cannabis. And so it's a lot of fun, and they're really low dose too, so that people aren't getting super, super high off of them. So I want to just share that with you. I agree on the hours of operation. And what I want to say about that is the state law allows you to sell cannabis till 10 p.m., but the local jurisdictions allow you to stay open if you want all the way till 2 a.m. Between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. is personal use. If you're telling a lounge that you want them to serve food, well, they can still sell food after 10 p.m. They can't sell cannabis anymore, but they could sell food and beverage. That's a lot of hours of revenue that you're adding to these businesses who are struggling. So I want to consider that's more of a small business kind of thing. And then the other thing I want to quickly touch on is the food itself. Lounges are currently allowed to sell prepackaged food and non-alcoholic beverages, as long as they're prepackaged. There's a bill running through the Sacramento right now. You want to hear the rest of that?
Go ahead, Jackie. You can continue.
I'll just finish about Sacramento. There's a bill running in Sacramento right now. It's already cleared the Assembly. It's just about to clear the Senate, which that's already happened. We're hoping the governor will sign it. That bill would then allow the lounges, in addition to having prepackaged food and beverage abilities, that would also allow them to have prepared food. So when people are talking about a restaurant, that law would then allow them to have a restaurant. So now you've got a restaurant, you've got a cannabis consumption lounge, and you've got cannabis beverages. So it's a complete package. So I just wanted to point that out to you so that you understood all of the things people are talking about at the dais. These are now becoming possible.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Next, we have Jake Wall, followed by Becky, and then Taryn Longo. Jake Wall, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening, council people. I appreciate your time. I am a longtime coastal and valley resident, homegrown, and I'm speaking to you this evening just to consider equality here. First of all, again, kudos to you for continuing to move things forward. That said, looking at the space itself, you've already heard comment about indoor versus outdoor. I do believe that outdoor is incredibly important, given that we are a community that enjoys, most of the time, very nice weather. And it's weather that you want to be outside and you want to enjoy. We've seen how, for example, during the COVID pandemic, how the outdoor dining experience with other aspects that were optimized really helped increase businesses and continue to sustain foot traffic and patrons. This is an opportunity for the same opportunity for Cannabis Consumption Lounge. By limiting it to indoor only, as well as limiting the hours, you're creating an experience that actually is less like a consumption lounge, and it seems to be a little bit more strictly involving I would say, medical treatment aspect. Now, the medical aspect of cannabis is undeniable, but when we're talking about a consumption lounge experience, it's important to understand that there is also that recreational use, and you want to be able to bridge the gap between the two for both the lounges and those parties to be successful, for the consumers to want to come back, and for you as the county to benefit on the additional revenues that will come through. Now, I won't speak to the zoning aspects themselves. I think you guys are better suited to make those decisions. But I would just simply say that when you look at placement of these opportunities, It's important to understand that for people who are dry curious, sober curious, aspects of beverage consumption in particular are the alternatives to going to a bar or going to another happy hour experience. And let's be very clear, happy hour experiences and nightlife don't end at 7 p.m. I think if you're being reasonable here and you're looking at this opportunity, you need to at least consider extending these hours of operation till 10 p.m. And alongside that, opening things up to an outdoor experience, which at least is inclusive of vaping, if not something supervised with smoke eaters and otherwise. These are existing technologies that have been in place for other smoke lounges like Cohiba and otherwise in many different communities. I'll give you time back within the last 30 seconds and just say, again, thank you for the progress that you've made so far. We think that you're on the right track, but if we can make a few more adjustments here, I think we've got something that we can really work with that will continue to benefit the Ojai community. Thank you again for your hard work.
Thank you, Jake.
Last raised hand we have is Taryn Longo. Taryn, you have the floor. Taryn, are you still there? We have one last call before we move
I'm
on.
here. Sorry, I'm here. Hello, my name is Taryn, and I just want to give my support for the lounge to be both indoor and outdoor open air space. I think that some of the concerns, they're valid, but they're also probably concerns from people who don't really smoke and who don't really know what it's like. It's not going to be like super, super smoky and intense. People are pretty chill. The research backs that it's less dangerous than alcohol. So I do think it should be open until 10 p.m. at least. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Taryn.
We now have two more. We'll have Severo followed by Becky. Severo, you have the floor.
Good evening, council members. Could you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and Mayor Sticks, I'm here to speak in support of the lounge. I wish I could be there in person just to add my full support because I think it's been a long time coming. I was on the council when we first introduced medicinal use. And I think it's just important that we keep supporting this recreational use of cannabis because it is proven to be safe. It's proven to have a lot of benefits. And I would compare it similar to the use of people that want to consume alcohol. And in my opinion, it's been proven that responsible use of cannabis is actually more responsible just in general than alcohol. So I would also want you to expand and think about adding or closing later at a later time, and also adding possible beverages, cannabis beverages. I think it is important for us to think broadly about this. And I can't say enough of the people that have worked on this issue, including staff. And I'm not an avid smoker at all, but I do support people that do choose to be avid smokers. Yeah, so I ditto everybody else's comment from Bill Miley to Mr. Wyrick to all the other speakers that have spoken. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Severo.
Next we have Becky. Becky, you have the floor.
Thank you, Weston. I wasn't really planning to talk tonight, and I'm really grateful to all of the people who have, because I've gotten a lot more information that I didn't know previously, but I do have a couple of observations I'd like to make. First is, when this was first discussed a few months ago, as I understood it, the way that it was left is that, as Larry Steingold mentioned, it was sort of like an experiment with 3 possible lounges. I believe they were to be owned by dispensary operators and somehow associated with those businesses. So there were basically 3 locations and 3 potential owners rather than a series of different owners. And And I really like the idea of continuing in that vein of considering this as an experiment with just the three locations, initially at least, so that we can see what unintended consequences might arise as a result of at least trying them out with these three initial units. Now, some of the things that have caused me some concern in the past are things like increased traffic, turning Ojai into a mecca for people who want to move into an alternate reality through wineries, breweries, and cannabis lounges, rather than staying grounded in everyday reality, which isn't the only reality that exists. But I think our culture has gone too far in the direction of alternate facts and alternate realities. And so I kind of like having people to remain grounded, at least to some degree. I also think we need to look at the environmental impacts, the potential fire impact. I'm really grateful to hear about there's these air scrubbers and other things like that that can mitigate against smoke and other nuisance odors or whatever that people might experience. But we also have to look at things like traffic study. Somebody brought up valet parking, which I'm really not on board with. And I'm also concerned about the impact on our local residents and our local footprint, given the fact that this will undoubtedly bring more tourism, more potential new residents, potential demand for STRs, which are now banned in our city, and a lot of other things that I think we need to really think twice about whether we want to invite more of into our town. So I really am, in conclusion, just really encouraging the council to look at limiting this to the three locations, the three owners, and to do all the necessary checks and balances in advance as much as possible.
Thank you, Becky.
That's all, Mayor.
Okay, all right, we will go ahead and close the public hearing and move on to council discussion. Who would like to begin? Councilmember Lang.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So I have a few things that I'd like to start with, and that is just speaking from a purely practical standpoint. I'm a believer that it's a good idea to support small businesses in our community, and that if this is, like Becky and Larry were saying, going to be like a template or a pilot or a test, then let's set them up for as much success as we can. And so I do believe that, and I also am in agreement with what Bill Wyrick said about ending, like destigmatizing marijuana usage. I think it's so important, just from a social justice standpoint, that we make a statement saying that that the rhetoric around marijuana usage has been problematic at best. It's been racially motivated, and I think we need to do everything we can to change that. So I would be a proponent for increasing the hours, or at least moving the hours back. I believe, Bill suggested 10 to 9. I would even be open to saying, 10 to 10 or 11 to 10, so that the people who would be otherwise using our bars and our facilities that serve alcohol could do that, could go here. I also do believe, from a safety standpoint, that it's going to be important for us to offer food, so non-cannabis food. It slows down the processing of marijuana, and also people are going to get the munchies. And that would be another revenue source for these, for the lounges. And so I'd like the ordinance to specify that I believe it was Jackie who said that packaged foods or prepackaged foods, so whatever's in accordance with state law, that we include that. And then finally, I don't know exactly how I I think, but I would be okay with usage or outdoor usage that wouldn't be, creating a lot of secondhand smoke for local residents. But I'm not exactly sure about that. I don't know. I'd like to hear what you all think about that part of things. But the other thing too, I just want to say from an economic development standpoint, this is kind of a no-brainer. And I know that our cannabis dispensary owners have worked really hard to push this forward, and so I'd like to support them, and I'm interested in hearing what you all have to say.
Thank you. Councilmember Rule?
In great form, I will just say ditto. But just a few other things. I agree with the small business element, and having gone to these, the dispensaries and met with Chelsea and Michelle, I think that they epitomize a great small business owner. And for that reason, not that I wouldn't support, many great small business owners, but I am inclined to believe and to agree and to give them the due respect when they say that they will deal with problems, that they will. I believe that. And so for that reason, I would be willing to go with an indoor-outdoor as, a pilot program. I love the idea of a rooftop, if that's a possibility. The hours, I can't see why it wouldn't be increased to 10 p.m. And I would also be willing to let, the business stay open till 2 to provide a place and some food and, to make it, as you say, let's set them up for success. And as far as beverages, cannabis beverages, if that's the up and coming cannabis product, we would be silly to say, no, you can't have that. It makes perfect sense. Prepackaged food, yes. And one thing I did sort of want to mention is in speaking to the cannabis dispensary owners, and they have a real approach to health and wellness, which I don't think we can underestimate. While it's not traditionally it's not traditional. We're not thinking traditionally of medicinal versus recreational, because I think that there's a blurring of the lines where they become, they may focus on one or the other. But the idea of massages with, oil. I that's what I do for my dog. And I know that I did do for my dog. The puppy doesn't need it yet. So that having been said, and then finally, as far as moving, and I know I'm just giving away the house here, but it just seems reasonable to me given the, the south side of East Ojai Ave, where the American Legion and, the hair studio is. That space really is prime commercial space that the city would benefit from having a good business there, and there is parking. So I think we would need to talk to Lucas. I saw him back when I was getting some coffee, and he said the language would have to be squishier, is what he said, to allow some flexibility. So he's got an idea of what squishy could be. So when I look at this, I just say, well, this makes sense. So those are my comments, and I would support and do support everything that I said and these modifications.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem?
Okay. So I'm in favor of complete, destigmatization, because, I'm familiar with the horrific past, and it's time to, make amends. I am in favor of leaving the operational details as much as possible out of the ordinance and leave it up to the city manager's discretion, like the council did with the original dispensaries. We've been having this discussion, I believe, now for 6 years, beginning maybe 2017. I remember going to visit the area with Ryan in the rain, and we've been at this for a long time. As far as the hours go, let the owners, I don't know about 2 a.m., but anything that we approve, correct me if I'm wrong, it still has to go before the planning commission to see that things like traffic impact and impact on neighbors and.
Not as structured. If this is the way as currently structured, the cannabis permits would come to the city manager's office, not through planning. So this wouldn't have to, the cannabis permits, if consistent with the ordinance, would not go through the planning commission.
Right.
It'd be like the original 3 dispensaries.
But for example, if they bought a building and started a new business?
As long as they're not modifying the building in any way that triggers a planning permit. So if you have an existing building and they're coming in and doing nothing but interior improvements, then that's an over-the-counter building permit on the building side, and then the cannabis side would be city manager's office. If, however, one of the lounges wanted to buy a site or rent a site, knock down a building and build a new building, then they're coming to planning for the new building, but not for the cannabis permit. As structured, the cannabis permit would just be the city manager's office.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So as far as, I'm definitely in favor of, at this point, keeping 3 owners, but as far as I'm not opposed to separating dispensaries and lounges if because of real estate and building sizes, there may be good reason. Ideally, I believe that everybody would like to see the dispensaries and the lounges together, but if it's not possible, I think we need to put something in the ordinance that one owner, we have currently 3 businesses, that wouldn't change. But if, for example, Chelsea couldn't expand in her location, that she be allowed, for example, to have a lounge elsewhere. Let's see, I really like the idea of patio space outdoors and all of that. If there's complaints, as far as I know, Chief Trina Newman, there's been no complaints. Last time we asked Chief Freihoff, he said there have been no problems. Is that still the cannabis dispensaries or anything? Okay, no problems. One issue that came up last time was the concern of overconsumption, and I'll just paraphrase what Jackie Subeck wrote in her public comment. Now that we have a few lounges open and they've been operating for a while, we have been able to collect data on the concept of overconsumption. As it turns out, this is an extremely rare occasion where a customer can sit down comfortably, relax, drink water, and regain their footing. To this day, I've never seen one single person being asked to leave, being carried out by staff, or being belligerent in a cannabis lounge. It's something that only happens once in a great while and doesn't need as much regulation as non-cannabis consumers might think. Did I say that I'm in favor of the comments made by my colleagues? And then we had one letter that I want to address that was in strong opposition to the lounges, and it had an article that was dated August 17 in the Washington Post, and I want to call your attention. He cites statistics, but he leaves out. He says American, that the marijuana industry is a 30 billion business in 2022. Then he compares it to ice cream sales, chocolate, and craft beer. But it's a drop in the bucket compared to 249 billion, and that's 2010 on alcohol sales. So you can look that up. We need to remind people that if we do not have safe, places that sell safe products, safe places to consume, then the black market flourishes. So banning dispensaries and lounges is not an option. We've learned that the hard way. Let me see. do we need to go through the ordinance, or are you catching our comments? It looks like you are.
Staff is catching the comments, but someone will need to make a motion who is on the council.
Okay.
Are you
I'll wait for you.
Councilmember
So
Whit-
I want to make clear that I'm not in favor of banning outdoor consumption. I'm in favor of maybe describing some kind of regulation for it. That would be fine. That's all, yeah.
Councilmember Whitman?
Yeah, I just have a few comments. So whatever that stigma issue is, I kind of doubt it exists in Ojai. My big concern is, and I kind of side with people who have spoken favor of progressing forward with marijuana commercial opportunities, that we do it carefully, that we do it, slowly and incrementally. So it does concern me that 3 potentially becomes 6. I think that the community is comfortable with our 3 dispensaries. And I have not heard any complaints from anybody that we do have those dispensaries. I like the idea of giving a broad level of discretion to the city manager as opposed to having specific regulations. Maybe they would eventually evolve into specific regulations, but it might be easier to adjust that way, and Mark likes the extra work. I do like the idea of confining this to the east end of Ojai Avenue, these uses to the east end of Ojai Avenue in terms of, a location for lounges. I don't particularly object, but haven't really thought about it, but the idea that we potentially move the borderline, the western borderline to Fulton, which would encompass the American Legion property, and it would encompass another block on Ojai Avenue, that I think would be okay. And I, like the idea, although I don't think that's where this council's gonna go, I like the idea of starting with 1 license for 1 lounge and see how that works for the community before we do 3, and look at it in a year in terms of, looking at should we have 2 or 3 licenses. I would propose having, some type of a lottery to decide who would get the license. And I don't, I'm kind of curious about the idea of moving. I'm not clear on the concept of moving the dispensary to the lounge location. So then we're going to have the lounges also become dispensaries. And I'm not clear on that concept. But those are my comments.
Thank you. Well, I'm pretty much in agreement with almost everything that council members have been saying, which is a great feeling. I love the idea that this is a pilot program and a template, and it's beginning, so we'll see how it goes. I think in the past I've said 1 step at a time, baby steps. So I feel at this point, historically, the baby is up and running and probably driving at this point. It's probably that naughty teenager that Michelle mentioned. So I think we need to. What about that? Cats' leashes. Okay. We need to set the business up for success, and as Councilmember Lang said, it's a no-brainer in terms of economic development. And also, I'd like to thank the business owners. I personally know Chelsea and Michelle and Jeff for your patience and your endurance, because it has been a long time period. And that it's really important for all of us to do everything we can to destigmatize an herb that's been around for since the dawn of time, maybe. And I like the idea of offering food and beverages, and I'd agree that being outside would be better if we can make that work and have air scrubbers. That sounds like a great idea. And also the idea of giving the operational details of the ordinance to our beloved city manager. So thank you very much for taking that on, if you will. And I think that's a bit, and it makes sense, of course, to extend the hours because 7 p.m. is pretty early. So does anyone want to make
I'll go ahead and make a motion.
Can we still have discussion after the motion?
We need to.
Yeah, I want to make a clarification. Did we or did we not decide that the dispensaries and the lounges have to be at the same location? And if we didn't decide that, could we open the public hearing and have Chelsea explain why, because of the shortage of the right type of building, that might be problematic?
So no decision has yet been made. It'll be up to what motion is made and then passed by council. So I would defer back to the mayor if you wanted to take further comment on that. But no decisions have been made yet. It's up to the council.
Let's get a motion on the table.
Wait, can I ask one
Yep,
more
sure.
question? Are there any current regulations for indoor or outdoor smoke ventilation?
At the moment, the city bans smoking tobacco products in any way in public.
Okay.
The only I think that's outright. The only exception I can think of would be a single-family home, where it's not regular on the outside. But as you'll recall, we've banned it on the outside of multifamily and any otherwise public employment place.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so on that point, someone suggested that for outdoor spaces, you could limit it to vaping. And actually, I don't know that much about how much vaping would tend to be disruptive to people adjacent to the property, but that seems like that might be a good option as opposed and limit, because we as a state limit smoking in public places, that we potentially confine smoke to the indoor portion with the appropriate scrubbing facilities.
Thanks.
Can I add one thing? I think it's really, I really appreciate Jackie calling in with data from lounges that were existent right now, and I think that's super useful, so we can lean into that, what's already happening.
Great, thanks, and especially if there's anything with the Air Pollution Control Board. Okay, so I will make a motion that we, I guess it would be to come back ask staff to modify the existing ordinance.
So there's two basic choices there. One would be to introduce an ordinance with oral amendments that could then come back next time for adoption. Choice two would be to direct staff to rewrite it, come back for introduction again. Between the two, I'd suggest the first.
Okay, I will go with the first. To ask staff to modify the ordinance, limiting to 3, limiting the number to 3, opening up the area to the east end of Ojai, so the C1. Can we follow this map right here?
So the way to do that would be cannabis lounges may only be located in the C1 zone, east of Park Road on the north side of Ojai Avenue, east of South Fulton Street on the south side of Ojai Avenue, and in the M1 and MPD zones, and may not be located in any other zone in the city.
Okay. Thank you. And then leaving the operations details to the business and the city manager. And then also including the sale of non-cannabis food.
Okay, great. Do we have a second?
You want a second?
Sure, I'll second. Okay, roll call, please.
Wait, I have a question. I still need a question. I mean, I still have the same question. What does the current ordinance say about separating? We agree there should be 3 owners, but it's still not clear to me what we're agreeing on. Can you help me find the part that addresses location?
So the draft ordinance in attachment A, page 7, at the top, subsection B, requires that the lounges be tied to an existing dispensary. So it would allow up to 3 lounges that could be located anywhere you have an existing dispensary tied to the existing 3 dispensaries. So 3 dispensaries could be 3 lounges, but the dispensaries would be allowed in the other part of the ordinance to expand to the rest of the specified areas. So you could end up with a maximum of 6 dispensaries, of which 3 would have a paired lounge. If you wanted to create more flexibility, as may be the case given the discussion, then the direction would be to drop the requirement that the lounge be co-located with the dispensary. So then it would be up to 6 dispensaries and up to, but the 6 dispensaries would still be the same 3 ownership as existing licenses, and then up to 3 lounges with the same 1 each per the 3 ownerships. So a max total of 9 locations, but not requiring the lounge and the dispensary to be together.
I'm sorry, that's completely confusing to me. And I don't care if everybody else is clear, I'm confused. I never.
On this
one. Okay.
Yeah, no, let's clarify.
I am not understanding why we would end up with 9. In my mind, the most we would end up with is 3 dispensaries, 3 lounges that are either located with the dispensaries or at a separate location, which would be driven by real estate economic necessity.
So that's an option too. It's up to what the council wants.
Well,
That's what I
Can we
understood.
get that in a
I'd
motion?
prefer
Yeah.
what she said to having 9.
Same here.
That's what I understood.
Also, just for the competition, again, we want to set our current owners up for success, and I think eliminating potential outsiders coming in to do that. I'm with what Susan.
Yeah, same 3 owners. They have their existing 3 dispensaries, and if they can manage to locate the lounges around the existing building or connected to, they will, or there's an option that they locate the lounges elsewhere.
So as I understand, then that would be to have a maximum of 3 lounges located anywhere in the zone I described, and a maximum of 3 dispensaries located anywhere in the broader C1 and existing M1 and MPD zones. And both of these are tied to 1 each, the existing 3 permitted dispensaries, which means the existing 3 permitted dispensaries could stay where they are or move, but not double.
Yes.
So then the net max would be 3 lounges and 3 dispensaries.
Yeah, thank you, Susan.
Okay,
Okay,
Yes.
all right, well, we have a motion,
And then,
and we have a second.
and just one more point of clarification. The dispensary and the lounge licenses could not be, split and maintained separately. And maybe that was implicit in what you said, but.
Yeah, it would be tied to only the existing 3 dispensaries is the only licensees for lounges.
Okay, all right.
Can I add?
Councilmember Lang, yep.
Yes, I wanted to add one more thing to my motion, and that is removing from the current ordinance any prohibition to outdoor space. And having staff recommend, I think if that could fall under the operations details, so that the city manager could work with the lounge owners and work with any air pollution regulations. I would like to add that to my motion.
Okay, all right, we have a motion, we have a second. Could we have, I see, just a minute, just a reminder, Council, could you come through the chair? We do have a question about the hours. You want to add something to
It's covered.
That was, did I believe I covered it.
Okay, I just
that,
saw-
that would be the operations details, so leaving the operations details to the owners and the city manager.
Okay, roll call. Councilmember Rule.
I apologize,
Yes,
yeah. Except for that we would allow to at least 10 PM. As you know. Okay, that's all. I just want.
Yeah, that could be additional direction of the manager.
Yeah, all right,
Yeah,
thank
you're
you.
not a fuddy-duddy, are you?
Yeah.
Only have 960 hours to do
Okay, roll call, please, Weston.
We are going to repeat the motion.
Yeah, I'm happy to take a stab at that one. So
can
it
as
would
well.
be to introduce the ordinance as proposed with certain modifications that would provide a limitation of maximum of 3 lounges and 3 dispensaries, with the licenses for lounges tied to the licenses for the existing 3 dispensaries. The same for the 3 dispensaries would be the 3 existing dispensaries, which could move or stay where they are within the zones as described. The zones would be for dispensaries, the C1 general commercial zone, and the M1 and MPD zones. The zones for lounges would be the C1 zone east of Park Road on the north side of Ojai Avenue, the C1 zone east of South Fulton Street on the south side of Ojai Avenue, and the existing M1 and MPD zones. The operational details would otherwise be left to the city manager, with 2 exceptions. Outdoor cannabis consumption would be allowed, subject to rules and regulations as developed by the manager, and hours would be up till 10 p.m., subject again to rules and regulations as developed by the manager.
Councilmember Rule.
Yeah, I need a clarification.
I need a clarification.
Okay,
on
so
probably
what I
same thing.
heard was
Yeah.
that the dispensaries could not be in the area on the south side of Ojai Ave, that only the lounges could be on the south side of Ojai Ave, but we should be able to.
Oh, no, I'm sorry to interrupt there.
Yeah, please.
The zone for the dispensaries is broader than the zone for the lounges.
Okay.
The reason the dispensaries don't have that east side, south side.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Limitation because it's the entire C1.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you.
There was the map in the packet.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Are we ready for the roll call? And thank you, council, for all the teamwork, and it takes a team. Okay, Weston, roll call.
All right. Councilmember Whitman.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Francina.
Yes.
Councilmember Lang.
Yes.
Mayor Sticks.
Yes.
Councilmember Rule.
Yes.
All right, motion passes 5-0. Let's take a short break, and we will be back.
This is good. Now we'll be able to hire a city manager. I just want to.
Some of them were felt.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure I
And
was.
I'll do this.
Okay, we are back, and we'll return to the public hearing. It's item number 3, introduction of a draft ordinance regarding amendments to existing unlawful short-term, transient, and vacation rentals to further strengthen the city's prohibition of short-term rentals. Do we have a staff report, Mr. City Manager?
Yeah, I'm going to turn to Lucas on this one. It's very technical, and I'm punting.
You've punted. That's fine.
Punting.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Lucas Seibert. I am the Community Development Director for the City of Ojai. The proposed ordinance before the City Council for consideration does two things. First, it further strengthens the code as it relates to short-term rentals within Ojai by shifting from the permissive zoning designation to expressly calling out the land use within the zoning ordinance or use charts, which is in Title 10, and clarifies the 1 calendar month versus 30 days, and this is really kind of due to that pesky month known as February. Second, it further strengthens the prohibition of short-term rentals identified within the code by expressly calling out short-term transient vacation rentals thoroughly or through a newly created section within Title 4, Chapter 24, which is really where STRs or short-term rentals lives. Both areas would further strengthen city code to continue enforcing rentals which are advertised and or marketed for less than 1 calendar month as proposed. The proposed ordinance revisions are included as attachment A to the staff report and include strike-through areas identifying language proposed for removal and underlined areas identifying language proposed for inclusion within the ordinance itself. The reason this is coming before the City Council is because it was requested by Council in 2022 and then brought through Planning Commission in February of 2022. So it's gone through the process before coming before this body tonight. And it caught the city's attention with case law based partially on the permissive zoning application. That's identified further within the staff report itself. Now, why has this taken so long? I did say 2022 and not 2023. Well, this item has patiently waited its turn to be before this body, and that's why it's here tonight. Now, for those interested in the permissive zoning, it's identified as any land use not expressly allowed or permitted via a determination or substantially similar use within Title 10 of our code, which would make that use prohibited. Simply put, if not listed, then prohibited. Now, staff's recommending moving forward with the ordinance provided in this packet, and I'm available for any questions by council.
Thank you, Lucas, for this patient ordinance. Much appreciated. Questions from council? Councilmember Lang.
I do, yes. So thank you very much. And so I had a couple of questions about the logistics. I know that in our community, we have people who stumble upon vacation rental listings, and or there are owners of vacation properties who will prorate their 30-day or their monthly bookings. So do we have an enforcement process for this right now?
Yes, we do. Code enforcement is very active and I would say very aggressive. We have strategies which I will not identify here tonight because they are secret strategies. But we do have ways in which we aggressively go after ones that are illicit or not operating within the parameters of the code.
And I'll just add, if I could, that if anybody comes across unlawful short-term rental advertisement or becomes aware of a rental that's advertised at 30 days but they believe has been operated at less than 30 days, they should report that to the city through the app or online, or is there a phone number?
There is a phone number. It's, I could...
Yes, give the phone number.
It's 805-646-5581, extension 117. That's the code compliance line. And that gets you directly to code compliance, and then it becomes confidential in terms of who's identifying the areas, and then we do that research and reconnaissance. So,
Other questions?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
How are we doing with raising the fine?
Microphone, please.
Oh, can we ask about questions like raising the fines, or have we recently raised the fines?
The fines have not been raised. Currently, the fine is $500 per 14 for the processing, so it's $514 for each violation.
I am planning to bring up enforcement as something that we need to get on the agenda. But my understanding is we can't address anything like that based upon what's in front of us tonight. We can't address enforcement measures, but we can ask them to bring enforcement measures back to us, correct?
Right, so for example, if the council wanted to look at increasing the fines, council could direct tonight staff to bring that back at a future night. We couldn't adopt the higher fine tonight.
Okay.
But we could give direction to bring it back.
Okay, you'll do that.
A quick question.
Yes, Councilmember
Would
Rule.
we do that at the end of, would that be a future agenda item, or would we do that here and now?
It could be done as part of this item.
Okay,
Because
thank
it's
you.
related to the short-term rental concept.
Okay, I actually have a question for the city manager, because I know you've had a lot of experience, especially in Indio, with this. So could you just briefly describe, in your opinion, how short-term rentals destroy communities?
This is a setup.
Well.
I don't want to get way off topic because it's, this is not a discussion generically, but briefly. What happens in neighborhoods where, especially in communities where the land value is high and the desirability factor is high, when people start finding a short-term rental market, it very quickly turns neighborhoods into something that is not your typical residential neighborhood. And we saw that in the desert. In fact, if you look at the cities in the desert, there's 9 incorporated cities in the desert. I think 7 of them now, at least 6 of them, have either full prohibitions on short-term rentals or very stringent restrictions. One of the exceptions was my city, because we didn't have hotels and we had festivals. And there was no way in the world the city of Indio can operate without short-term rentals in order to handle the festivals. But what it did do is it turned whole neighborhoods into short-term rental markets, including my own. And frankly, the best economic thing that ever happened to me in my life was when my neighborhood went all short-term rental, and I got an offer that I'd never expected to get in my life, but it completely ruined that neighborhood in terms of any residential viability. And it affected the housing supply. It affected it very significantly. Almost all the other cities cut back on short-term rentals because it was affecting housing supply, and it was very definitely affecting the residential neighborhood communities. So I think you're all very smart to be very careful about what you allow with short-term rentals.
Agreed.
Thank you. Any other questions from council?
I have
Councilmember Whitman.
I have a quick one. So I think we've talked about this at one of our meetings, but the concept of or the strategy of fractionalization of units, and my understanding of that is that you sell a place to many people, like a timeshare type of situation. And it's effectively a vacation rental, but it's not exactly the same creature. And so my question is, does our current ordinance capture or prohibit fractionalization? Where someone might get 1 week a year in a place in Ojai.
Yeah, so I'll start with yes is our current position, but it could always be strengthened. Fractionalization refers to a couple of companies that have sort of invented this model where you take ownership of a residential property, sell the property to an LLC, the members of the LLC, that is the owners of the LLC, are then somewhere between 2 and 20 individuals, or perhaps trusts, who then, as a member of the LLC, have a right to occupy the house for their share. If it's 2, it's 50-50. If it's 4, it's quarters, etc. And it's a new creation that's been pioneered by a company out of the Bay Area, one of the techie companies. There's a whole lot of them in Sonoma and Napa and that wine region. And they're moving into Southern California. We're starting to see them in this coastal regions. They have so far targeted properties north of $2 million, targeting about $500,000 per share for quarters, which is a little above our typical price point, but certainly there are plenty of properties in Ojai that fit that category, so the risk is there. Our position is that, however structured, if the net economic effect is a timeshare, even though it's an ownership system, they still have, per the operating agreement in the LLC, a time-limited right for which they've paid for, and therefore it amounts to a timeshare. So our existing prohibition on timeshares prohibits it. That's the city's current position. Staff would not be opposed to coming back with an ordinance designed to further prevent it. The matter is being litigated in Sonoma and I believe also Napa. And none of that has hit the Court of Appeal yet, so we don't have reported case law. So it's very much a cutting-edge problem, and we'd be happy with council support to return with an ordinance further designed to prevent that creative, but still in the end, timeshare.
Any other questions from council? Okay, we will go ahead and open the public hearing. Our first speaker is Ishel Mazer. Then we have Nora Harold.
Hi, City Council. My name is Ikshal Mazer, and I was raised here in Ojai. I am speaking today to support a harsh ban of Airbnbs and short-term rentals across Ojai. Because of Ojai's lack of approval of new housing, growing property taxes, and increasing cost of living, people in our city are looking to offset these expenses through Airbnb. And why should they not? Who could blame them? After all, most residents who grew up here probably have much of their liquidity in their homes. They do not plan on selling their homes, and perhaps not much of a retirement plan either. They're also past the age of having children. So I ask you to take this a step further. City Council should ban the advertising of all short-term rentals in residential zones across Ojai. But this should also be done in conjunction with 2 other actions which center around housing. The other 2 actions are, step 1, permit short-term rentals in commercial zones because there is a market for it. For example, Main Street commercial buildings downtown should have a second story that can be rented out for short or long-term rentals. The transient occupancy taxes alone from this will provide a lot of cash relief to Ojai. Step 2, build more housing. You guys as a council have the obligation to help young families who can afford the $3,000 to $5,000 per month in rent that Ojai commands. But those people will send their kids to public schools instead of new homeowners who can afford to send their kids to private schools in Ojai. These people need 2 to 3 bedroom starter homes or apartments in our valley, so we don't have to close down every single school. In short, please ban short-term rentals in residential zones only, change zoning to permit short-term rentals in commercial zones, and approve new housing for residents so we can have young families in Ojai again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ikshal. Next we have Nora Harold.
Hi, everybody. I really want to thank you all on this meeting tonight. It's been so wonderful, and on the work you all did for the unhoused population during the storm. I also want to thank you all for taking up this issue. STRs have really destroyed, well, we heard about it, so I'm just really here to support you being as bold and brave and powerful as you can in ridding the valley of STRs. I know you don't have purview over the entire valley. I live in Miners Oaks, and I lived across the street from a short-term rental for a period of time. and it was like living across the street from a hotel. I never knew who was there. And I love my neighbors, right? I'm like, our neighborhood is awesome now that they're not there. We all know each other again, and we have community, and we have potlucks, and we have love with each other and healing. And STRs are a problem when it comes to these things. So thank you very much. I really encourage you all to be as stringent with advertising bans, bans on short-term rentals, extending the period of time, going from beyond 30 days. I encourage you to do it all. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Nora. That's not a card right there. Wes.
That's for a future item.
Okay.
Sorry, Mayor.
Anyone online?
Yes, we have 2 on Zoom. First, we have Larry Steingold, followed by Vicky Carlton Byrne. Larry, you have the floor. Larry, please unmute one more time. Give him one more second. I know he's there. Larry, please unmute. Last call, Larry, before we move on. All right. Next, we have Vicky Carlton Byrne. Vicky, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening. Just a quick remark about the company you were talking about with fractional ownership. That is Picasa, and they have moved into both Malibu and Santa Barbara. So it's a thing, and it's something to consider to add into your deliberations. About 7 years ago, I began identifying and mapping short-term rentals in the Ojai Valley. Valley-wide, at last count, there are over 225 active STRs representing accommodations for more than 1,200 people. In the city limits, there are somewhere between 35 and 40 active short-term rentals, not including those that are completely underground. They're increasing on a weekly basis. I'm regularly asked why any are operating if they're illegal, and the answer is twofold. The operators lie and game the system, and the city staff hasn't been given effective enforcement tools by the city council that other cities have to shut them down. Listings will state 30 days only, but can be booked short-term through private communications. Some hosts will book short-term on weekends when staff is not monitoring, then change booking options on weekdays. Some hosts will take a 30-day deposit, guests will stay for a weekend, and then get a refund. The current fine for violation was mentioned. It's woefully insufficient. $500 is not much of a deterrent in Ojai, where the average nightly rate is about $420. And no matter whether the hosts are technically in compliance or not, these properties are not available for people to live in. Owning an STR in Ojai has become quite lucrative and relatively risk-free. For example, recently a realtor from Venice has purchased 3 properties in the city limits and is short-term renting them off of their private website. I support clarifying the language in Ojai's code to prohibit STRs, but it doesn't really matter how an ordinance reads if it can't be effectively enforced. All council members are sworn or have sworn to uphold the law, and I hope this council will provide staff with more effective tools to do so. Neighbors deserve to live next to neighbors, not hotels. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki.
That's all, Mayor.
Okay, we will close the public hearing and move on to council discussion. Who would like to begin?
So
Councilmember Whitman?
Yeah, sorry. So I support all the amendments. They seem pretty simple and they seem to strengthen. I would like to see us bring back, or have staff bring back recommendations about increasing the length from 30 days to at least 60 days. I would like to see us look at methods of enforcement that may include increasing the fines, potentially graduate the fines so that first-time offense is $1,000, second-time offense maybe $5,000, and a third-time offense I think should be something pretty significant. I think also look at awarding attorney's fees to a successful prosecution. And I also want us to look at the strengthening our ability to protect against fractionalization, which I think is coming here. And then I'll just make kind of a quick comment that since I've been on the Planning Commission, 20 years ago, I came to understand that, and this is part of our general plan, that it's really critical to housing affordability that we protect our existing affordable housing stock. And that's exactly what we're talking about here today. So we need to do what we can to make sure that those places, even if they don't have, deed restrictions or whatever else attached to them, if they're functionally affordable, we need to keep them available for people to rent as a place to live, so we don't become a community of visitors. Thanks.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, I support all the recommendations that my colleague Andrew Whitman stated. And I just want to clarify, both for myself and the public, you can still rent a room to a friend for a month. You're just not advertising it as an STR. If you know someone that's in between looking for rentals and as a temporary place, maybe their stuff is in storage, you can still rent out a room short term. That's different from an STR.
For a month or longer?
For a month or longer. Well, I mean,
not less than a month.
okay, let's talk about that, okay? Because in reality, you might have a friend that needs a place to stay for a week, and there's nothing to prevent them from chipping in for utilities or whatever. It's not like a draconian rule that somebody's going to be spying if you rent a room to a friend. That's just not Ojai.
If you have a friend stay with you and they gift you a certain amount of money in return for utilities, that wouldn't be a rental contract.
Mm-hmm. There's no rental contract. They just, there's some things that are understood, okay? But the point is that you can still rent out a room to a tenant for a month or longer.
Correct. Month or longer.
That's, that we have to really distinguish that from an STR. And I will testify that I found many, not many, but there were places that were kind of a hybrid. Part of the time they would do a furnished rental, maybe to a local resident. And then the other part of the time, it operated more like an STR. And that's what we want to prevent, so that we do save those places for our people that work and live here.
Councilmember Rule?
Yeah, so if you can rent out a room for a month or more, how is that different from being able to rent out a short-term rental for a month or more? I mean, I don't see the distinction there.
The key is the month or more. Short-term rentals are allowed for a month or more. Renting a room is allowed for a month or more, but not less than a month.
So it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I'm just saying I don't see the distinction there, because they both have the same requirement, which is it has to be rented for a month or more.
Exactly.
So I don't. That's all I'm saying.
There is no distinction there.
Okay, thank you. So I just needed to make that, because I wasn't grokking like how that was different. So I do support, rethinking all of this and making it more stringent and keeping our neighborhoods, neighborhoods to speak of. But I would point out again that we have a number of items around housing, and this is one of them. And the many times that we have talked about, I think it was the first, well, it wasn't the first, second, or third, but in the fourth session, we talked about having a housing discussion, a housing workshop, and we couldn't even figure out what that would look like. But as we keep adding these things, it makes little sense to me to isolate them without putting them in the big picture. I mean, because it's just, it's siloing something that is much larger. We heard our one of the public comments say, yes, I want this, but what about building housing? And what about, putting this into allowing, the commercial zones? So this is all part of a discussion. And I would like, once again, to have it be a holistic and full discussion. We keep siloing and getting nowhere, really, because we
It's
haven't
on the priorities list.
I know it is, and so I wanted to say yes, and I think before we start bringing back ordinances, we have that priority discussion. We talk about housing from A to Z as much as we possibly can. It just seems to me it's spinning our wheels if we have our city attorney writing these ordinances. And then I will point out, if there are lawsuits, we should wait until those lawsuits are decided before we start writing ordinances and things like that, would be my opinion on the fractionalization. I mean, we could write something, but it just, once again, seems like there's so much we need to do to write ordinances before we have a court finding. We may decide to write it even with a court finding, but I'd like to see that before we start writing ordinances.
Councilmember Lang?
Yeah. So I want to speak to, I'll speak to what you just said in just a second. But, I also lived in a desert town in 2016, in Joshua Tree, and watched our entire community within a year be destroyed. Families who had grown up there not being able to afford houses because all of these people from LA were moving to Joshua Tree or buying second houses, and the short-term rentals were paying for their mortgage. And so this is something that I witnessed firsthand. The entire community was really devastated. And the weekends were too crowded. I can't say enough in support of an ordinance for short-term rentals. I also agree with what Councilmember Rule said, that we need an overall housing workshop, that this is a priority of ours. And at the same time, this ordinance to me feels like it falls more in the category of hotels, and that even though there's a housing component to it, we're also talking about the business that is taken away from the inn, or from the Hummingbird, or the El Roblar coming up, and so and the TOT. So I think we need to move forward with this before we address the rest of the housing. And then I also want to speak to the few people who have talked to me about, that they like to go away and rent their house here, and I really do hear those perspectives. But I think if we open up the possibility of short-term rentals for a few exemptions or for a few different people, it's a slippery slope that then puts us back into it further perpetuates the lack of affordable housing here. So I just wanted to mention those few things.
I'm going to take a
Yeah,
turn.
please.
I agree with my council members that we definitely need to strengthen this code and support the amendments and increase the length of 60 days for sure, and also strengthen the methods of enforcement and increase the fines. And I like the idea about the attorney's fees also. And really protect our housing stock, because the United Nations, for example, it says that if you want to protect your community, you've got to ban short-term rentals, basically. We do have a consultant who does the searches for the ads, HDL, I believe it's called.
Yeah, they do that. We do use them.
We do.
I
Although I will admit
I
that
wasn't going to evaluate their service.
I don't want to go into the details
Okay,
of it,
well,
but certainly staff in working with HDL.
Okay, and I know, we have a very small staff, and it takes a lot of time, so I'd like to look at
But we do
options.
have weekend coverage.
Yes.
And then just to, I mean, I think, and I hear, I've heard people say, can't you bring this back? And they want to travel, or they want to do this or that, and I understand that. I just think, I'm going to read a quotation from Carolyn von Driscoll's letter, which was so eloquent. So she wrote that such rentals undoubtedly affect the essential character of a neighborhood and the stability of a community. Short-term tenants have little interest in public agencies or in the welfare of the citizenry. They do not participate in local government, coach Little League, or join the hospital guild. They do not lead a scout troop, a volunteer at the library, or keep an eye on an elderly neighborly. Literally, they are here today and gone tomorrow without engaging in the sort of activities that weld and strengthen a community. So I think it's really our moral obligation to strengthen this ordinance and do everything we can to clarify any language that needs clarifying and take care of our town. And I think we've done it's great that we have something that's there now, and just we need to make it stronger and more stringent. So, and also, I know that there's been a lot of research on how to get around these issues. So I would really appreciate if staff could look at what's happening in other cities and, draw from that. So that would be great. Mayor Friedman?
Yeah.
Yep.
May I? Okay. I have a little bit of hesitation still about the 60 days, but I do know that if you go on on the Ojai housing site, you will see people who are desperate to stay with anybody under almost any circumstances, just so they don't have to start commuting to work from Oxnard. They'll take a room for a week, a month, 2 months, whatever, until they find something more permanent. So my question is, it's a connected question. How do you ban, like it's obvious when a person is renting an STR, you find them on the STR sites. And if a person is renting a room, they're just doing it, from the Ojai housing site or through word of mouth, through friends. And we don't really expect to regulate everything. We can't. I mean, if a neighbor doesn't see a constant stream of people with suitcases, different people, then, there's signs if a person's really living in a house for a month or two versus is on vacation. So I don't know how we can word the language so that it's not illegal for me, not that I have a house to rent, I'm renting a room myself, but it's month to month. And I wouldn't want someone who offered me a room for a month to get in trouble for it.
So let me try to clarify this. Month or longer rental, so that includes month to month, is legal.
But Mayor Sticks is asking for 2 months.
That's a different conversation we'll have to have separate
That's
from
what I want-
this
and
ordinance.
And just a reminder, tonight, we're just talking about strengthening the amendment, the ordinance that we have.
Okay. Excuse
Right.
me.
So this is
I
stuff,
thought we had
this
to
is
do-
stuff, no, this is to bring back to us.
Okay.
And then we can discuss the fine details.
Okay.
Can I make a
So,
motion?
well, if I make,
I wanted to make a comment, though, on what's been said, and that is, I agree 100% with the idea that we need to have a workshop and we need to talk about housing as a holistic, across the community. What are our available solutions? Get feedback from the community about what they'd like to see. On the other hand, I agree 100% with Councilmember Lang that short-term rentals are really kind of a different animal than quote-unquote housing. It's more of a commercial endeavor, and it's, somewhere in the hotel range. So I don't see any reason why we wouldn't bring and, move forward with addressing short-term rentals, quickly while still, getting on track. And I think we had a housing workshop on track and it got derailed with other issues, but I think we whole council would like to see us take a community partnership with with our community and talk about how do we address housing for now and the future.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Okay, two things. I don't believe that the housing workshop that was held derailed. I just respectfully, because.
No, I wasn't trying to suggest that.
Okay, so thank you. All right. But I wanted to ask about the point that one of the speakers made about permitting STRs in commercial zones. I don't think I would be in favor of that, because if we're going to permit housing, it should be housing in commercial zones, not STRs, right? That's the idea. Yeah, I mean, I can understand it, why she would consider that. That's an improvement over residential neighborhoods. But for example, we have discussed some kind of housing overlay on, it's just been in discussion, nothing official. For example, across the street from the old Westridge, the American Legion, those buildings, they could have housing above some of those buildings and still keep the commercial. But we would want people that work in Ojai to live there. Yeah. So I don't think that's an option.
Council could direct us to bring that back at a future item,
Well,
but
let's,
not on tonight's agenda.
And also, I'm aware that there have been offices that, and I believe that he did come before the city, on Bryant Street. One of the owners, those suites on, you know what I'm talking about? It all already kind of looks like a condominium complex. It's beautifully landscaped, and I think, and some people would like to live in those offices. That's a separate conversation, but that's something we might want to consider if there's vacancies.
And that's another idea that could be brought back as a future agenda item,
Yeah.
also not on this item.
Yeah, let's focus on this agenda item. Is
Okay.
somebody ready for
Yeah.
a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Okay.
Please.
all right. Well, let's hear the motion first.
Okay, the motion is that we approve the language that's been proposed and shown to us tonight, that we also instruct staff to bring back any variety of issues addressing how to enforce the short-term rental ban, including, but not limited to, increasing the length of the ban to 60 days, to address fines, to address attorney's fees, to address fractionalization, and to educate us on what other communities that are addressing this issue are doing.
And perhaps other enforcement tools.
I meant including but not limited to those things. So any other enforcement tools that are out there, I'm interested in.
Great. Second? Someone like to second the motion?
Sure, I second.
Okay. Roll call, please, Weston?
Yes. Is the motion understood by all?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Francina.
Yes.
Mayor Sticks.
Yes.
Councilmember Whitman.
Yes?
Councilmember Lang.
Yes.
Councilmember Rule.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. All right, we will move on to item number 4. Lost it. Approval and acceptance of easement dedication trolley shelter stop at 205 West Ojai Avenue in front of Bank of America. Do we have a staff report?
Yes.
Lindy's
and
back. Hi,
with
Lindy.
thanks to Lindy Palmer for sticking around. She's going to do this report.
Thank you, Lindy.
Of course. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Hang on a second, let me get this set up. So the item in front of you tonight has got several components, and and those are in your recommendations, which I'm going to spend a moment and talk to you about the history of this project, and I know a couple of you are fully aware about this. So in 2016, the city received some grant funding for a bus shelter. Actually, we applied for a grant and had 5 locations identified. When James hired me last year, about a year ago exactly, he said, we have to get this B of A bus shelter built.
Yes, you do.
So that was number 1 on my list. So I want to spend a few moments and talk to you about this because it's a seemingly very small, very simple capital project. It's not high dollar, but there were so many moving parts for this project. And I have been working on it for a year. So I looked at the picture, looked at the bus bench, the existing bus bench, and I thought, I think that's on private property. Well, we hired a surveyor. It was determined that the existing bench is on private property. It's on Bank of America property. So the next step in that whole process is trying to find a local contact at B of A who can talk about property acquisition, because we needed an easement for that. So finally found somebody at Bank of America, a corporate office on the East Coast, and before they would talk about any property negotiations whatsoever, they needed to see a design. They had 3 criteria, one being they wanted to maintain visibility of their business, of the bank, from Ojai Avenue. They wanted the smallest footprint possible with the least amount of parking spaces impacted, and they wanted it aesthetically pleasing. So we hired Mark Whitman to produce a design for us, a preliminary design, and back and forth we go with Bank of America. So we finally settled on a design, which I'll show you some photos of it in a moment, but I wanted to just give you a little bit of a background first. So worked on a design that we could live with, that Bank of America could live with, that met our ADA requirements. So we finally got there. Then we had to hire a surveyor again to give us a specific footprint for the easement. Then we needed a temporary construction easement, because when we go to construct this, we're going to be using Bank of America's parking lot in the front. So I worked with surveyor, architect, community development so far. And Lucas, who was just here, Lucas had given me a director's exemption on the loss of 1 parking space and the preliminary design. So here we are now. So the components of what I'm asking for tonight is the review final review of the bus shelter, what it looks like. And again, these were many, many back and forths with Bank of America, because they wanted it to look a certain way. They wanted low profile. They want all kinds of things. And then we've got to execute our permanent easement. So we are now asking B of A, and they're doing this. They approached this as, we want to be good neighbors to the city. We're not going to charge you for this, which they could have. They didn't. And we have gone back and forth. So on the design and on the footprint of the easement. So temporary construction easement, a permanent construction easement, and then approval of the design plan and authorizing staff to go out to bid so we can get this thing built. So James, can you give me the next slide, please? So here is an aerial photo of the site. The red line is the property line, and the existing bench, you can see that in the green, is on private property. So, and I've identified the parking spaces so we can talk about them based on numbers. So we are going to be 4 and 5 will stay as is. 1 and 2 will get restriped, moving to the west. 3 will be gone completely. So any questions on this slide? Okay, next slide. So this is what we ended up with our permanent easement. It's going to be a 14-foot by 17.5-foot rectangle. Our bus bench and our bus shelter will be in that box. So next slide.
Can I ask how many people? Oh, there's the, okay.
So this is just a rendering. I'm sorry, it's a little bit blurry. This is as good as I could get, but this is sort of what it's going to look like. And you can see on the left-hand side of this, of the shelter is handicap parking for a wheelchair. And then we've got probably space for 4 to 6 to sit on the bench. And of course, there were some design challenges because we didn't want it to turn into, say, a queen-size bed. Just saying. So we had to kind of shrink it down a little bit. We had to stay in this footprint, and we were mindful that we didn't want this to really become someone's evening accommodations. So next slide. And so this is more of a, this is what the preliminary design looks like. The words aren't that important, but it will be stone, it will be nice lumber. On the roof, we're not planning on tile. The tile's a little bit of a maintenance issue, so we're going to do corrugated metal. And that's sort of what it's gonna look like. Next slide, and that's from the front and the back, so from Ojai Avenue and from the bank. Now this is from either side, so this one's from Blanche, one's from the west side. So this is what it looks like. So with that, I am available for any questions.
Mayor Pro Tem?
So I brought this forward because I kept seeing people sitting in 112 degrees. There's no shade there, surrounded by asphalt. You would see mothers with children, elderly people with their little cart, and it just was a sad commentary because we're supposed to be a green city that encourages public transportation. These people are wonderful. They're car-free. You know, they deserve a nice, shady bus stop. But so my question is, I'm happy that it accommodates 4 to 6 people. That sounds about right. But we want it to also be a cooling place. Is the metal going to be hot? Is that the only option? Or that was my first thought.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It's high enough up, we should get some air circulation underneath. And you can see the roof is also sloped a bit.
Okay.
So if it rains, so this is good for summer sun and winter weather as well. And it's got a pretty significant cantilever, meaning it goes over, it provides shade for more than just direct sun at noon. That's what the goal was, to, when the sun's a little bit lower, you can still have shade. You might have to move around a little bit, but there's still going to be shade.
That sounds so good. And Mark does beautiful work.
He does.
So it's going to look really great.
He does.
Thank you, Lindy. Thank you
course.
so
Yeah.
much for all those steps to do something like this. Thank you.
And something to be said about that is any time on a capital project, particularly when you're working with a private property owner, and again, they wanted to be good neighbors and they were willing to negotiate with us. We may come across other projects that property owners aren't so willing. And this is a year when they're willing.
Well, thank you. It's
So
good.
I'm just saying.
Aware of all
Advantage.
this.
I'm sure you can connect the dots on that one.
Any other questions from council? Nope. Any public comment on this item? Weston?
No raised hands on Zoom for item 4.
Okay, let's move on to discussion. Who would like to begin?
I discussed
Let's,
it.
okay, we don't want to take too much time.
Isn't it?
Lindy said.
It's kind of a done
Okay,
deal,
would
isn't it?
someone like to make a motion?
I would like to make,
First of all, I think the design's great. I think it's a great project. Did anyone look into like solar lighting or options for that?
We did. One thing that I'm trying to be mindful of when we build structures like this or do anything is there's ongoing maintenance. And so the bank parking lot already has lights. And so I'm trying to not incur ongoing maintenance if we don't have to. We have a hard enough time maintaining what we've got. We really do. And so we did look into it, we did discuss it, and decided against it.
Thank
So-
you.
And one other point I would like to make before you vote, so I will be calling Mark tomorrow if you approve this tonight, and we have he said, maybe about a month before, he's got to hire a structural engineer for the footings and for the structural integrity of the structure. And so that's about a month out. So I will be coming back to you in, say, 6 weeks or so, 6 to 8 weeks, approving a contract for the construction of this.
Thank you, Lindy, and thank you for all your hard work on this and your endurance.
Awesome.
And to Bank of America for being such a good neighbor.
Indeed.
Would
Yes.
anyone like to make a motion?
I just have one more question, and this is just a technicality for our city attorney. If Councilmember Whitman's immediate family member is involved, would he still be able to vote on this?
My understanding is that Councilmember Whitman and his brother have no financial ties.
Okay.
and they're both adults. So assuming that's confirmed, there is no, does not generate a conflict of recusal question. Mere siblingship doesn't itself generate a conflict question as long as there's no financial ties and all.
And I think the
Council member.
contract with my brother was entered before I was
It was.
a council member.
I
So-
believe that's also true.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Okay.
I'd make a motion that we authorize the execution of the permanent easement and direct staff to record, that we authorize the execution of the temporary construction easement and direct staff to record, and that we authorize staff to solicit bids for the construction of the trolley stop shelter.
And I'll second it.
Okay,
Second it?
roll call, please, Weston.
Did I second it?
I think Councilmember Lang got
okay.
to first.
Second by Lang.
It's my baby.
Oh, okay. Do you want to
No,
go
I don't
ahead? You
care.
can second it.
It's okay. It's our baby.
And I just
It's
read
our
it from
baby.
the, I just read it from the staff recommendations.
That's fine. It's fine.
Understood. Councilmember Lang.
Yes.
Mayor Sticks.
Yes.
Councilmember Rule.
Yes. Yes.
Councilmember Whitman.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Francina.
Yes.
Motion
All right.
passes.
Can I just ask
Yeah.
Lindy, is there going to be a trash can nearby?
There could be.
I highly recommend it. I just keep seeing parking lots that have no trash cans, and there's trash.
And one
Yeah.
other point to make
Yeah.
too, depending on the space.
Microphone?
Planning on putting, a bike rack,
Oh, yeah.
a bike rack behind it, bankside.
Perfect.
If it
Perfect.
works.
Yeah,
If it
yeah.
works.
Be so nice.
you. Great.
Thank you so much, Lindy. Much appreciated.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Thank you, Lindy.
All right, we will.
Lindy, thank you, thank you.
We will move on to item number 5, selection of executive search firm to conduct the city manager recruitment. Do we have a,
I'll just introduce it and turn it over to the mayor. The city did a request for proposals to hire an executive search firm to conduct the search for a new city manager. We got 3 great proposals from 3 great firms, Bob Murray and Associates, Peckham and McKinney, and Ralph Anderson and Associates. Earlier today, the city council in closed session, which is allowable for something related to the city manager search, did interviews with those firms, and I will turn it over to the mayor and the council for that discussion.
well, I, first of all, just wanted to thank the 3 companies, Peckham and McKinney, Ralph Anderson Associates, Bob Murray and Associates. We spoke to 3 incredible people who really were so knowledgeable and helpful, and all of you would have been amazing. So it was a really hard choice to make. We appreciate all of your attention and paying attention to what's happening in Ojai, which is interesting. And we did come to a decision. We picked Ralph Anderson and Associates, Heather Rentschler, whom we spoke to, who's the owner. We all loved Heather. We all loved all 3, actually. Just Heather has an incredible amount of experience. The firm's been around for 52 years. She's been working there since the 80s, I believe. And I personally feel extremely confident that she has exactly what it takes to find the perfect city manager for us. And she's very attentive and also understands that it's an unusual market at this point, because it's really hard to find a city manager. So I have a lot of confidence in her. So thank you. Thank you, Heather. Also, thank you to Tony and Gary, because you're really incredible, and we appreciate your time. Any other council members? Mayor Pro Tem?
Oh, I just want to echo the mayor's comments. All 3 search firms were outstanding. I would characterize them absolutely outstanding. That some of them had unique qualities that the others didn't have, but we were happy to unite in appointing Heather. And I want, if you're watching, Heather, make sure that candidates watch this meeting. They're- This is how we are all the time.
Peace and love, Heather. And I also want to thank Mark Scott, our city manager, for organizing this, and for and also our city attorney, because we really are grateful, and it was really good interviews. And
Yeah.
Great selection, so thank you for all your hard work on that. Any other comments? Okay, is there a
I'll
mo-
just echo what has already been said, that we had some really fine options to choose from, and it was a very close choice between the candidates, and I think we're going to do great with who we've selected.
Madam Mayor, I was going to just jump in there. If there's any public comment, that would be good to take before the vote.
Oops, sorry. Oops.
No raised
I'm
hands
so
on Zoom
excited.
for item 5.
Okay, off the hook. Okay, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we, our selection for the search firm be Ralph Anderson and Associates, led by Heather Rentschler.
Okay, is there a second?
Why don't you second it?
I will second it. Okay, we need a roll call for that?
Yes, roll call ready. Councilmember Whitman.
Yes.
Councilmember Lang.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Francina.
Yes.
Councilmember Rule.
Yes.
Mayor Sticks.
Yes. Okay, all right, moving right along, we will look at our last item, item number 6, a request to agendize ordinance to protect city elephant bodily rights. Is there a staff report?
Not so much. This item was requested by council members to be added to the agenda, and I put together something very brief, but I'm going to turn it back to the council members who brought this up. I think Councilmember Rule is going to speak.
Yeah, I'm happy to explain this. I do have sheets of paper for information for those who are interested. But essentially, this ordinance will codify for Ojai an elephant's fundamental right to bodily liberty, which just simply means that you cannot hold an elephant captive in Ojai unless the space is comparable to an accredited sanctuary. This is a bodily rights ordinance. And people have asked me, what about other animals? And I can speak to that. And people have asked me, why now? Why here? Why now? I will say that we will be the first city in the country to have an ordinance declaring a fundamental right of liberty for an animal. Why now and why elephants? There have been suits around the country over the last 6 years. The most recent and the most high profile is Happy the elephant in the Bronx Zoo, who has been in prison for 40 years and has been by herself for 15 of those. This organization, the Non-Human Rights Project, brought a habeas corpus case for unlawful detainment for Happy the elephant in the Bronx Zoo. 6 years in the courts, it finally made it to the highest court in New York. 7 judges, the decision went against Happy and for the Bronx Zoo, but 2 of the judges issued an incredible dissent, pretty much asserting all of the reasons why sentient, emotionally, intellectually, and physically complex animals should not be imprisoned in spaces that are not conducive to their health and wellness. So we have the highest court in New York has made a dissent, has dissented on that. Meanwhile, we have the Fresno Zoo that has 3 elephants in a small space, and a suit was also filed for the Fresno Zoo. It was found that the elephants, it was found for the Fresno Zoo that the elephants were not entitled to a fundamental right to liberty. And this really comes down to the idea between welfare laws and rights. Welfare laws require that you have enforcement. There's all kinds of things, and I have some papers to speak to that. But a fundamental right is a right, which means I can go to court at any time. So this organization filed a suit against the Fresno Zoo. Fresno Zoo won, basically on a welfare ordinance. But they are now in the process of filing an appeal with the California with the California Supreme Court. And what we can do is we can show, by passing this ordinance, that we are part of a society that sees the changes happening around our understanding of the emotional and psychological and physical complexity of these large sentient beings that are being held captive in zoos. So that's why now, that's why here. The Fresno Zoo is not that far away, and there's other things about the Fresno Zoo. There were 3 elephants, all taken from Africa, sold by a sanctuary in Africa, claiming that the elephants needed to come to American zoos, otherwise they would be euthanized because there wasn't room. There was a big uproar about that. Probably not true. We made a lot of money, so breeding is a lot of money. Meanwhile, the Fresno Zoo, with the 3 elephants, they tried to, one's a mama and her baby, her daughter, and another male elephant. The Fresno Zoo wanted to breed them, but unfortunately, the male or the females were not interested. So they packed off the male to the San Diego Zoo, and they brought in a stud. The mama and the baby are now pregnant. So we're having this kind of, and there is a whole idea around the breeding and captivity of these animals. And the idea is that they have a fundamental right to exist without benefit to humans. They do not exist to benefit humans. They have their own right to exist. So that's what this ordinance is about. It's a very simple ordinance. It just simply says, and it's a one-off ordinance that says elephants cannot be held captive in Ojai unless they have standards that an accredited sanctuary would approve. And so, and for people to say, well, we don't have any elephants. Well, we did have a roller skating elephant at one time. And I think that it was cute then. I don't think it would be cute now. So that's why this ordinance, and basically it will lend credence to the appeal to the California Supreme Court to send the Fresno elephants to a sanctuary, to give them bodily liberty. So I'm perfectly happy to answer questions. I'm sure there's probably a fair amount, but this is, to me, a civil rights issue. It is a civil rights issue for animals, and we know with scientific evidence, the way the last 30 years have gone, that they're emotionally, psychologically, intellectually very complex creatures. So that's why I brought this motion forward. I think it is the first step to other things that Ojai can lead. We did have an animal rights and rights of nature forum. So I see this as the beginning step, and I'm hoping that my fellow council members can see the importance of this movement and of this motion.
Okay, questions from council. Councilmember Lang, and then Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, so I received one of the public comments. Did we at one time have an animal keeping ordinance in the works? Okay,
Yes.
okay.
We do have one.
Okay, we do have one?
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm wondering, I'm wondering if there's a way to, we can talk about this in discussion, but I'm just wondering if there's what's the status of that animal keeping ordinance?
Separate.
I can answer because I read it. And basically, it says that if you're going to keep certain animals, and it's not, there's like no comprehensive list, but it's a, traditionally wild animal, that you must keep it in an enclosure under conditions that are suitable to that animal. So it's kind of vague, and it certainly could be improved.
Yeah.
I can I'll actually speak to that as well. That ordinance is almost certainly an animal welfare ordinance,
Yeah.
and this is an animal
County-
rights
county
ordinance. And they're hugely different in how they're enforced and what they actually grant, the particular animal. Enforcement, animal welfare, and welfare laws are something very different than animal rights laws or people's rights laws. So I would say that that was a distinction between the two, a very important distinction between the two, because there are animal welfare laws all over.
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, my understanding is that this is a simple ordinance that will not take up a lot of staff time. I think the public might be concerned about that. It's very simple.
Yeah, I have a template ordinance that is also, it's a simplified version of an ordinance that is working its way through the city of LA and also the Bronx and the city of New York. So this is a very modified but well vetted. Ours is a much simpler ordinance, obviously, because we, number one, don't have a zoo here.
Yeah.
And we're only speaking about elephants. So, but that would be a question certainly for City Attorney Summers.
I think with the model in hand, we could prepare it expeditiously.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then maybe during public comment, Dale Hansen, you could talk about how we banned animals in circuses after we open.
Okay, hold on, we're still on public, on questions, so just to confirm, Councilmember Rule, the purpose is to give credence to the appeal.
This purpose is to show that society is changing its views towards the captivity of animals. And it's not to give credence, but it's to give support. It's to show that there is societal change happening, because when you go to court, you know, these rights, especially the right of habeas corpus, is all about an expansion and who now should be covered by this. It used to only be white men, then it was slaves, then it was women, then it was children. So this expansive great writ of habeas corpus, and that's the writ that is being used. So it is to lend support, but it's also to show that society is changing, and here is a city who has said, we are changing. We do not believe that any longer. So, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Or
I do have a
Councilmember
question.
Whitman?
You mentioned that people have asked you, why not, you know, other animals? So, you know, let's say giraffe or lion or something like that. Why aren't we addressing the, you know, and insisting upon sanctuary-like conditions? And I did read on the internet that there is like an international standards for wildlife sanctuaries, and they address the different animals. So why wouldn't we also include other wild animals in doing this? Is it the intelligence of the elephant that?
It's mostly that the scientific data that they have and the degree to which they have, this has been in the New York courts for 6 years, so they have amicus briefs that are from here to eternity, and, you know, so that's why. It is in its own way, you know, timely, but Councilmember Lang and I talked about this is not the end. This is only the beginning. And once you can start once you can start coming up with all of the kinds of evidence, scientific evidence, you have to put it together, though. It's not, I mean, and then you have to make a case. And with the elephants, it's all been done, right? And so that's the problem. I mean, they're doing it with whales, and, you know, Lolita just died, and that was a 20-year battle to get her out of an aquarium. So it's happening with these animals. The country, Ecuador, has enshrined in their constitution rights of nature. So this is just a start for us, and it seems to me to be small enough but large enough. And it's simple enough to move through because the ordinance already exists, and it will end up in the California Supreme Court as a statement of, I'm not sure what they're going to call it, you know. I mean, I assume they will. They'll say the city of Ojai has done this, you know, and that will lend credence to it. So, yeah, I mean, the same organization has fought for the freedom of chimpanzees in New York. They could not get to the high court for whatever reason that was. You know, they have the evidence. around it. But like I said, this is really just the start. This is not in any way complete or the end. We need to figure out as a city and as a society within this city where we want to go with this. And that's not really, that's going to require a little bit of outreach, you know, to bring everybody together and figure it out. So that's why it's just timely, right? And it's the Fresno Zoo. So it's within our sphere. And the suit is already going to the California Supreme Court. So those kinds of things make it timely.
Okay, let's move on to public comment. First, we have Anita Cram and then Dale Hansen.
Good evening. Thank you for bringing this issue. Elephants are scorched in my heart. I worked in zoos for 23 and a half years. I've been out for about 20 years now. My last 2 years of zoo work, I worked elephants. My last 2 years of keeper work, I worked elephants. When I moved into management, curatorial, 2 major zoos, I had to be proficient in shooting a rifle that would kill an elephant, a rhino, a polar bear, a gorilla. If I had God forbid I would have ever had to do that. I did not. I am thankful for that. That bullet would go for 2 miles in the city of Chicago and the city of Phoenix if someone missed their target. That's a tragedy. One of the tragedies of elephants in captivity. This still weighs on my conscience that these animals are kept. You can't replicate a habitat for an elephant in captivity. There should be no breeding programs except in countries of origin. Any elephant, there should be no additions. We should only have elephants that are currently in captivity. I would be careful about accredited sanctuary standards even. I think Ojai should go above and beyond that. And they are highly intelligent, very complex social structures. We don't even understand it. They communicate at vibrational levels that humans cannot hear. It's just such a tragedy, such a tragedy. Elephants used to be chained at night, all night long. I mean, I have to say one of my most frightening encounters in my zoo experience was with an elephant. But I had to do my job at the time, which I'm not proud of, but it's just something that should not happen. Why elephants? They're special, they're big, they're strong. They have to be dominated in a situation to keep them intact in a captive environment. If they're ever in a case where a visitor to the zoo is, or anywhere in a community, is at risk, the elephant will be killed. And you talk about breeding programs, male elephants go through a condition called must. When the females are in heat, they get crazy. When I first started in zoo work, this is a long time ago, decades ago, elephant keeping was one of the 10 most dangerous jobs in the United States because keepers got killed. And that's the condition, that's the situation. They don't belong in captivity. So, and I will say to any community member out there who doesn't understand this, if you have ever visited a zoo, you've been a part of this. You've given your money to support the situation. Tax dollars for any governmental zoo, your tax dollars go to it. I was so happy when I moved to Ojai, no zoo. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita.
Thank you, Anita.
Next, we have Dale Hansen.
Great.
I'm Dale Hansen. I live in the city of Ojai, just for the record. I really appreciate the last speaker. I couldn't do that job either. Today when people in my office said, well, what's with the elephant? Aren't any elephants in Ojai? And they were laughing about it. And I tried to explain, this is not about an elephant in Ojai, although we used to have one. I visited Tara when she was here. But for me, this issue is about the difference between animal welfare and animal rights. Animal welfare is very weak. It's very easy to get by anything that supposedly is protecting the animal. But animal rights is different. And that's what I'd like to see Ojai be a part of this ordinance that Councilwoman Rule has brought forward. I think it's really important. It makes a statement. Ojai can make a statement that is statewide and maybe eventually countrywide, because we need to respect these animals. We need to give them their rights. The last speaker pointed out the reasons why they are intelligent. And like you pointed out for whales, I mean, people are starting to wake up to what we need to do to be decent human beings. We have a long ways to go. But I appreciate your bringing this forward, and I really hope you approve it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dale. Any comments online, Weston?
Yes, Mayor, we have 2 raised hands. First we'll have Becky, followed by Larry Steingold. Becky, you have the floor.
Thank you, Weston. Again, I'm not really prepared to speak, but I will do my best to express my views on this topic. Let me just preface my remarks by saying that I am not at all I'm not at all saying that elephants should not have rights, are not worthy of protection, or any of the rest of it. But I am one of those people who would say we have a host of animals, wild animals, living right here on our own backyard wilderness, and we cannot assume that they too are not very complex creatures with rights to survive and thrive unmolested by humans. I'm all for societal change that is more inclusive of all living beings. And I would say that also includes things beyond animals, trees and wild rivers and other things that have a right to be wild and free. Rather than establishing animal sanctuaries, perhaps we need to acknowledge that we are the interlopers into their habitat, and it's incumbent on us to consider the rights of nature rather than considering everything only from a human-centered viewpoint. No wild animals should be held in captivity in Ojai or anywhere, in my opinion, other than those who may be temporarily in need of rehabilitation or veterinary services in a qualified animal clinic where they are treated by professionals prior to being released back into the wild. And I know that sometimes it's difficult to release animals back in the wild if they've spent time with humans for too long, but those are issues that can be worked out. But I do think that we need to support the rights of local wild animals first, along with the rights of local humans over tourists and wannabe Ojai transplants. And I think that maybe rather than working on this as an ordinance just about animals, perhaps the council should direct staff to consider expanding our concern to create an ordinance that makes Ojai a city that supports sustainability and the rights of all the natural world, including not only humans, but also the animals, plants, rivers, etc., living in our wilderness. All animals have a right to exist without benefit to humans. So why focus only on one species while ignoring the entire ecosystem right around us that too often we are too poised to destroy? Thank you.
Thank you, Becky.
Next we have Larry Steingold. Larry, you have the floor.
Thank you. At first, I wasn't going to say anything at all because I didn't have a clue. And then I started to listen, and then I started laughing. And then I didn't. And then I realized that animal rights is a wonderful thing. But you mentioned slavery. You mentioned ownership. Can I have your dog? No, you own the dog. Can I have the mayor's dog? No, she owns the dog. How about Mr. Whitman's horse or whatever? Doesn't matter. You've got horse owners out there. You've got cat owners. Can I go empty their fish tanks? And I'm just saying, I know it's a stretch and it's probably off the wall. But if you get, at some point it's got to stop or it doesn't and nobody owns a pet. But that's where the end is. or it's get rid of meat, whatever, it doesn't matter. But call it what it is. Okay? First it's the elephants, now it's wild animals, now it's nature. If a dog is on a leash and wants to take a dump on my yard, whose fault is it? The owners or the dogs? Do I sue the dog? What do I use as you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, it's not just an easy thing, and it sounds silly, and maybe I'm crazy, and you probably think I am, okay? I just think that if you give one, all of a sudden, hey, how about the guy's horse down the street? Does the horse have rights? He wants a bigger stable. Okay, how do you know? He kicked the door down. Okay, I know I should do stand-up comedy. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
That's all on Zoom, Mayor.
Okay, we will move on to council discussion. Who would like to begin?
Can I just make a comment? Larry made the slippery slope argument. For this particular instance, we're talking about rights, and it's a very high bar for rights. And so while I understand the slippery slope argument, it's highly nuanced, and I'm happy to have the discussion with him anytime. It would take hours for me to explain how the slippery slope argument works in this particular case and how it doesn't work. But I understand the slippery slope argument, and it will come up. It is something that we have to think about. And it will come up. And to Becky's comments, I just wanted to say that I think that's what we mentioned here about, moving this forward to, a more expanding our scope. But right now, I don't think that it is my place or anyone else's at this particular dais to make that. I think it's a community decision, and we have so many people in this community who are interested in this, who have given deep thought to it. We have the Chumash and the indigenous people who, this is, the rights of nature is fundamental to them. So I don't think that we can actually do this right now, and rights are very complicated. It's not a law, like a welfare law. So to that point, I really appreciate everybody's comments. And Anita, thank you so much for your experience in being able to speak to this. This is the first step, and then we have a community discussion of where we want to go after that. That is what the nature of this ordinance was for. So thank you.
Councilmember Lang?
Yeah. So I support this ordinance, and I think that it makes a statement that, to Councilmember Rule's point, it makes a statement that we really are moving forward in the conversation of the rights of nature. There's a lot more that needs to be developed in terms of how local municipalities handle rights of nature, and to respond to some of Larry's questions. And those are points of inquiry that I'm researching. I know Councilmember Rule is researching, and I've had people also ask me, what about why elephants? Why? And I think that that it's because it puts us on the map as being a part of a bigger movement that's taking place. And it says that the city of Ojai is making a stand for the freedom of animals that have traditionally been kept in captivity. And I am sure that over time there are going to be more animals that are added to this list. But I think it makes a real good statement about who we are and what we stand for. And I would be open to bringing up at a future time the rights of nature as an overall discussion topic.
I just want to support what you two councilwomen so brilliantly stated. Thank you.
Councilmember Whitman?
Yeah. So I don't know if I support it until I see the ordinance, is kind of my first comment. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time discussing it, but I will say that I have been struggling with the idea that this is like a thing that a thoughtful law professor would bring up in class and have you discuss the difference between passing laws that are designed to prohibit destructive, damaging behaviors versus passing laws that make a declaration about, I don't think this is the right word, but the word that comes into my head is like metaphysics. And whether, we are a body that adjudicates those types of things. I know that if you went into court with this issue, you would need to have so part of my problem is that, and this was kind of hard for me to necessarily grapple with, but we've got centuries of laws that, and they are still on the books today, that say that, persons can own animals. And that there are ownership rights that attach with that. Now, I do understand the concept of potentially carving out elephants as an animal that you can't own. And I wouldn't have any problem passing an ordinance such as that you cannot own an elephant in Ojai. I am concerned, and I think I just have to leave it to Matt to figure this out, whether our body should be making that, type of, it's almost like a spiritual conclusion. And maybe it's not wrong that we make a spiritual conclusion, but it bothers, it kind of, just not 100% comfortable with doing anything other than doing the, protective thing. We will protect these animals. That seems like our role. I guess I'll have to spend some time between now and whenever this comes back thinking about our role as, declaring those types of more metaphysical issues.
Can I make a quick statement, if I could? So I did send you the appellate brief and also the dissenting opinion of the High Court of New York. And all of those issues are also broached. And so I think that would give you some sort of moral compass as to how to think about this. But quite honestly, all animals are considered things and they have no rights. And this is the first type of ordinance that would say, in fact, because of habeas corpus being used for an animal, they're no longer a thing. They are now have legal personhood, which allows them all kinds of things. We know corporations have legal personhood. There's all kinds of things that have legal personhood, but what does not have legal personhood is an elephant, is a chimpanzee, is a whale. So this is meant to apply a habeas corpus, which is the great writ, which is a right. And once you do that, you change fundamentally how the law looks at animals, and that's what's really important about this. And I'm also happy to have that discussion. I also have written educational materials around this to explain all of this. And so I would hope that you would actually delve, because it really isn't a metaphysical, it's a very clear and real discussion and point of law. It's habeas corpus being expanded outside of the normal realm of humans to include animals, because all of the qualities that have allowed the Great Writ to expand over the years from the time of Somerset and slavery in the 1700s in England, all of the rationalizations and reasons that have been used to expand the Great Writ to include people, we now find because of science, because of our understanding, that are now included in animals. So this is what this whole case is about, is can we now say that animals have personhood? And by the way, personhood doesn't mean humanhood. Personhood, which would give them rights. And that's what this is about. It's, to me, it's very tangible, it's very real, and it is a sea change in how we look and how we treat animals, as well as how we look at ourselves and how we look at the society in which we live. So I understand you are not the first, the only, or anyone to have this kind of argument. This has been 30 years in the making. The lawyer who finally who finally argued this case in front of the New York Supreme Court 28 years ago thought it would take him 30 years to be able to get in front of the High Court. So he beat it by 2 years. So there's just all kinds of things around that, but I don't want to minimize your sort of struggle with this. And I definitely do not, but I'm happy to have a conversation with you anytime. I'm happy to give you all the documentation in an attempt to give you some clarity on where this actually sits. And I can go through history around animal rights that start with, Pythagoras all the way down to Cesar Chavez, all of them citing animal rights as the fundamental and core belief of what makes us human, how we treat animals. So anyway, that having been said, I know I've spoken a lot. This is a passion of mine. It's been a passion of mine since I was driving around in northern Vermont and heard the lawyer who argued this case was going to be in upstate New York. And I drove from northern Vermont to upstate New York to hear this case being held. So I will leave it at that. I'm going
to make a comment. I appreciate you putting on this on the agenda, all three of you. And this has also been a passion of mine since birth. And animal rights, the movement, has been around a long, long time. I did bring the book, of course, because in 1975, Peter Singer published Animal Liberation, and he's a philosopher. He is part of the bioethics department at Princeton University now, and it's not about loving animals so much as the philosophy, and he really breaks it down. And the whole question, in my mind, is, do animals suffer? And it's a great read. And I read this in a night in the 80s and became a vegan overnight because I couldn't argue with him. So there's been a ton of court cases, and I think that this is an opportunity for us to make a stand, to support the appeal. And of course, we should include all animals, I think. This is the beginning, from what I can, seems like, and Ojai has an opportunity to be a real beacon of sustainability and compassion. And I think animal rights and the rights of nature are the next movement. It's happening already as we speak, and I think it'd be a great thing for us to support. So thank you for bringing this to our attention. And I'm sure there are things to work out in it, but I think supporting that appeal would be a really great thing for us to do.
I want to make a recommendation. Perhaps the city website and the Ojai Valley News website could have the documentation that Leslie, Councilmember Brule, provided us. It's excellent, your documentation, and there was a cover letter to help the public understand why this is so important. Yeah. And
thank
are you
you.
going to make a motion?
I will make a motion that we ask council, city attorney Summers, to bring back an ordinance that that supports the bodily liberty and the right of bodily liberty to elephants in Ojai.
I'll second it.
Okay. I guess we just do all in favor. Do we need a roll call? Nope. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
can I make a comment?
Sure.
I first of all, I want to thank all of you for not pointing out during that discussion that I'm the former city manager of Fresno.
I know, I was going to. I thought of it.
But when, is it Anita? Is that when you salve your conscience about whatever it was that you were talking about, add me in there, because I was the manager of Fresno and used to be a member of the zoo. And I will, when they turn this in at the Supreme Court with the statement from the city of Ojai, they can put a little asterisk in there that says the city manager of Fresno is now the interim city manager of Ojai. But more to the point, people ask me why I keep doing what I do, because I'm old and ought to be have stopped by now. But, and I always say the same thing. People hire me theoretically because of my experience, but every time I go into a city, I end up learning so much more than I had going in the door. And I will tell you, a week ago, I would never have imagined we'd have had such an intellectual discussion on something that was so far off my radar screen as this topic. And it's been a rewarding week in that regard, and in some ways disturbing. And I thank you all for that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll say, Mayor, to any public that's interested, all materials received to the dais after the start of the meeting will be included on our city website tomorrow.
Thank you,
on
Weston.
the public comment section.
I also want to just
can we-
thank my fellow council people for the support across the board. It means the world to me. So thank you so very much.
We'll move on to council member reports. Anything to report out?
I do. Yes.
Councilmember Lang.
First of all, I want to thank Ellen Sherwood, whose brownies delighted us in this really long meeting. They're keto, vegan, paleo, gluten-free, vegan gluten-free. They are divine. And so if anyone needs brownies or any other baked goods, Ellen Sherwood, she gave them to the mayor and the mayor shared them with us. So
Yeah, she had heard that I loved her vegan gluten-free brownies, so she baked a whole box for all of us and brought them today. So thank you, Ellen. You're the best. Much appreciated. So sweet. Thank you for saying that.
Of course. And then I have two other things. One is thanks to our wonderful librarian, Ron, I am going to be reading my children's book, my newly published children's book, at an event on the 30th, and as for children. And there's an activity that goes along with it where kids can make sun catchers, really cute star-shaped sun catchers. So that's happening. I don't remember the time. I think it's at 11 a.m., but it's in the morning at the library, and I'll be reading As Above, So Below, my children's book.
I'll bring my grandkids.
So I just wanted to,
Congratulations.
thank
That's
you so
lovely.
much. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I've got a couple
Councilmember?
things to say. First, while Betsy was busy thanking people for being on top of the earthquake and the flooding, she didn't mention herself. Because I did call her and ask what is going on with the homeless people. And I know that Betsy was instrumental in making sure that Kent Hall was open for people who wanted to be out of the rain.
Thanks, Andy. It was a group effort, and I'm grateful to everybody.
Last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, someone was putting stuff on social media about the idea that we've got a problem with drinking water in the Arbolada. And so I called Casitas, and I just want to report what they reported to me, which is that, first of all, the drinking water in the Arbolada comes from a pumping station on Grand Avenue. They're not pumping the water that's there. And then the next thing they said was that if the concern is that the pipes run through, and I guess I should back up on why there would be a drinking water concern, and that is that because we had such a heavy rain year for the first time in 13 years, we've had this artesian phenomena where water kind of, pushes itself up from the ground. And ends up pooling and spreading around. And there have been some readings by, I'm not sure exactly who's taking the readings, maybe the sanitation district, but of high bacteria levels. So what I was told by Casitas is that, first of all, they meticulously test the water quality of the water that they purvey. They were kind of wondering why people weren't calling them if they thought there was an issue. But they also said that the pipes that run, through the ground to your house are regulated such that they have to have sufficient pressure in them so that there never is any type of intrusion from the outside. So what I got back from Casitas is that the Casitas Municipal Water District is that you shouldn't be concerned about your drinking water quality at all. Mark and I have talked about getting the county to advise us on what we should be saying about that water seepage issue and what we should be telling homeowners. And I don't think we've gotten a response back yet, but Mark has been following that issue, and James was before. In fact, he even, had brought it up as one of our agenda items at one point to say, do you authorize me to spend time working with the county on tracking down this issue? So that, I'm just, for the sake of anybody in the public who's concerned about their drinking water, you can check with Casitas if you want, but they assured me that it's good.
Thank you, Andy, much appreciated. City, do you want to?
Yeah, just, we're on sort of whatever counts as a council member report.
Council member reports.
Okay, well, I just want to thank Matt Summers for this excellent article on the Supreme Court Hears Voting Rights Act case. And in case you missed it, there's hope that maybe Ojai will return to being all of us will again be elected at large. There's going to be a decision, 9/25, September 25th.
Between now and then, yeah. September 25th is the deadline for the State Supreme Court to make a decision in the Santa Monica CVRA case. And once we have that decision, we'll update the council on that.
Yeah, so there's hope. That's a ray of hope. And then, are you going to, or someone is going to alert the public that we're having a special meeting on council priorities?
Let's city manager's report right now.
Talk about it, yes.
Yeah.
Is it my turn?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I have two things I wanted to bring up. One is we are going to have a priorities discussion on August 30th. I think we set 4 o'clock as a starting time. It's not that we don't want public input. We always want public input. We live with and on public input. But this is a workshop really for the city council to give us feedback on priorities. Hopefully, we're not going to spend 3 hours listening to everybody's ideas before we get around to 20 minutes of discussion with the city council. I mean, it's really intended to be a workshop for the city council to talk about where you want to place your priorities. And I think it'll be very worthwhile. I hope the public watches, the public can come and attend. We're going to do it at Kent Hall. It sets up nicely there. We can do television there, and we think that'll be a good place for it. So that's coming up, and I hope people are interested in that. The other thing I want to bring up is just a question, and I say in this because if I say that, I want to make it clear I'm not asking for a vote because it's not on the agenda. But a question has come to me about whether or not, or how to go about a council fee waiver proposal. The Foster Park, do you all know where Foster Park is? Good, because I don't know how to tell you. Has had damage first from the Thomas fire and then with the rains this last year. and they're trying to raise funds to do some improvements in their community. It's not in the city, but they are holding a fundraising concert at Libby Bowl in October. I think it's October 7th that they have reserved. And they've asked for a fee waiver. I have no idea how to process a fee waiver. I can put it on a city council agenda if that's the way it's done. If it's what, $700 is what we're talking, well, $700 plus $3 a ticket that would be, that they're seeking to have waived. And I don't know if that's something you authorize the city manager to do, or if it's a put on the agenda type item, but I'm asking your input.
Can I add one other thing to that? So this group does have a 501c3 fiscal sponsor. So all of the donation would go through their fiscal sponsor. It's the Community Foundation. And so that would meet one of our requirements.
So do we need to put this on a future agenda?
Well,
One approach, if I could jump in, would be if there's no opposition to it, then staff can use the authority already inherent to proceed with the fee waiver at the staff level, because I would assume the amount at stake is less than the city manager's authority. If there's opposition or concern, then it could come back on a future council agenda.
Sounds good.
So my concern would be that we make sure that whatever, I don't know what costs are associated with putting on a concert that the city might absorb, that we'd be.
We would, part of the deal would be that all out-of-pocket expenses would be paid for, and that they still have to provide event insurance.
Right.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And the damage
Yeah,
deposit.
yeah.
Which they'll get back.
That's my recollection, that
I
when
would-
we did special things, they did have to pay out of pocket. There were conditions.
So
Yeah.
that would be good
Yeah,
with
because
me.
others will ask, yeah.
And I would recommend that whatever out-of-pocket expenses there are, that go to Matt LeVere with the county. It's his. That maybe he can find some county funds to assist with this project.
They're working with the county.
Okay,
The
well,
group is
good.
working with the
Yeah.
county. Yeah, yeah.
So if we did have, my concern is if we did have expenses, then we would probably have to do something more formal, but I think if we're clear, then we're good.
I appreciate it. It would have been nice if I'd have put it on the agenda previously. We got a little mix-up on a couple things, and so I just wanted to raise it, and I really appreciate that suggestion on how to deal with it, and we'll deal with that way. Thank you.
Okay, well,
Are we on future agenda?
yeah, but can we wait to talk about those at our priority workshop next week?
That was my
Okay,
question.
Okay, yeah.
So at the priority workshop, is the agenda already set for this first September meeting? That's,
There are agenda items that we have identified for the first September meeting, yes.
okay. So if there's room, then we can, Larry Steingold is unrelenting. We have to get the 25-mile speed limit and all those, but we're going to discuss it at the.
We can put it on to discuss. I have a lot of questions for you all about that issue.
Yeah.
I've got great reservations that a community can set a 25-mile-an-hour across-the-board speed limit. Hopefully, you don't think you can.
Well, you can't on 150.
Well,
can't touch the state highway.
Okay, I'll research it.
More than that.
We've had this discussion before. I'll point, and also, I believe there's a new state law.
There are new state laws, but it doesn't give you the ability to set a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit in the entire community.
We're talking about residential neighborhoods.
Well,
Yeah.
you already can,
Yeah.
if it's below a certain size. He's gonna tell me to
All right,
shut
that's
up.
So we'll talk about.
I was just gonna say, yeah, so.
Yeah, okay.
It's
At the
late.
priorities workshop, the council can set the timeline for when that comes back, which could be the first meeting in September or a future meeting.
Yeah.
And plainly, the matter needs further study.
And we can give you cities where it's being done.
Listen, I know this issue, believe me.
Okay.
I've
Okay.
been doing
All
this
right.
for 45 years, every city I've ever been in has talked about this issue. I do understand that there's a new law, and I understand what it restricts and what it doesn't restrict.
Well, okay, we,
Shut me up again.
are we done?
That's enough to,
Are we done? Okay, well, I just want to thank everyone for a fruitful and civil and harmonious meeting, and we got through 6 agenda items. So thank you all for being here. Thanks for hanging out.
Yeah.
And we have a closed session, so we're not adjourned.
Oh, my God.
right, we have one final closed session item with the indulgence of the council,
forgot.
which may be quick.
But we have to ask everyone to leave, right?
That would be the request. And I'll just note, the item is to consider existing litigation, City of Ojai v. U.S. Forest Service et al. District Court case as noted in the agenda for the case number. And reportable action is possible. And if there is reportable action, it will be reported out next time.
Okay,
Thank
all
you.
right. Thank you all. Thanks.
Thank you for such a great meeting.
Thank you. Bye, thank you. Okay, so we will adjourn to closed session?
Yes, and I